the pre-show music or anything? Or we're live? We're already live. We're already live. Look at that. Oh, look at that beautiful backdrop that Gerber's got. It's like a painting, but it's actually like your curtain is filtering the actual outside. No. Close it. It looks like a painting like that.
Yeah, it does. It looks really good.
All right. So
there's no one here. Join the chat. Oh, hang on. It's just been announced. Let me go to Twitch and see if I can do the Twitch chat in here as well.
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Do that on here.
Yeah, why not? Fuck it. Let's see if anyone's around.
I do have a very
Beatcast is live. There's one viewer. Mercy. Hey, Mercy's here. He may be our only viewer today, but that's all right. And we'll have the replay anyway. So I'm just gonna say hello, Mercy, in the text, even though he can probably hear me on the show.
Yes,
that's true.
Because I'm speaking live.
Damn,
so yeah, I guess. Do you want to say hello and hey, flying arepa?
That worked. Okay, so I put the link to StreamYard.
Just because this wasn't already a train wreck, you want to just invite anyone else who wants to join in.
We can
come on. I mean, they can if people have questions. So what we're doing today, let's just say hi, right? Do you want to do it, or do you want me to do it?
Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, no, you do it, Danny.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first and probably last Koala Creative Community production sort of Q&A, AMA, some other like acronyms like BMA, UFC type situation. Hey, fucking boss. Bravo. How's it going? Yeah, so basically Remy announced that we were going to have a week off, so everyone's got 2 weeks to make their tracks. But I don't know why I'm talking. This is what annoys me. Sorry, I'm sidetracking already. But what annoys me when people are streaming is that they're looking at themselves or looking at the chat, and it's not actually looking at the camera, which I'm just going to do now.
From my perspective, it looks like you're just shouting at Michael.
Things.
yeah. Right. So, Mike, do you want to explain what we're doing here today?
Well, sure. So I actually had an idea for a show a long time ago, like 3 years ago, like 2.5 years ago, which was, we would just jump on and help our friends, make music or like learn new techniques. And since I started, Danny had been effectively making videos for me on how to do technical things that I didn't know how to do when I was first learning, and I really appreciated it. And it kind of occurred to me that this is a perfect format to jump on and show people how to do things. So that was the idea on this show, and it's only taken 3 years to finally try it. So I don't know if it's going to work because we haven't really practiced, and we haven't we don't have any set thing that we're going to teach. So
we've got a few little ideas of things that people have asked you specifically that you were going to show, stuff like Scalar, and we were going to look at just like how collaboration stuff might happen. So we were discussing a situation where you're sharing projects with people who don't have the same plugins, and obviously, this is going to be outside the scope of just Koala. Hey, Black Beats. So, some basic stuff that people aren't necessarily aware of is, the quantum recording in AUM, which will be useful for getting exact beat, sort of bar length pieces into Koala, so then you can share those between each other. But we were also discussing setups, and this may get a little bit thick in the weeds, but we're discussing setups about live performance. And Gerber, earlier in the week, we were talking about potentially he wanted to try and make a mixtape out of his catalog, or a selection of his catalog of Beatcast tracks, right? So what I suggested was that he go back and actually export some sort of focused stems. And I know, Pete, you're like well into this at the moment, working on your own live set sort of setups. And just have like, say
real quick, Danny.
Yeah.
Actually, part of the idea on this was from Pete's setup video, where he showed how he was doing everything live. And it occurred to me that, like, hey, if I was just to export out my loops, I could try to trigger it live potentially, and that could be a good way to like segue between songs. So that's
yeah. So the problem we were trying to solve was how to segue between songs. And I know Remy mentioned this the other week as well. Is like how what are the solutions for trying to do that? And I came up with a couple of ideas. Mainly is like at the moment my sort of default setup is to have like 8 stems set up. Although I whenever I do my live performance type recording stuff, I tend to only really use 4 or 5. And what I was thinking would be good for Gerber is if he goes into each of his tracks and identifies the rhythmic elements, the melodic elements, then the more abstract elements, and then just put those into separate layers. Export all those, and then we can look at how to mix the beat from one track into the abstract stuff from another as a transition, which brought me to kind of using crossfades, obviously. But then I came up with the idea of actually using 2 sources, so 2 koalas going into the same set of buses, but having a per layer crossfade. So that's something we might look at in a bit, which I thought Pete might be interested in talking and thinking about as well. I've not tried it yet, but it's pretty straightforward in my head, so we'll see what happens. But before we get to that, I don't know if Gerber, you want to do some other stuff. Like that's just like what's coming up if you stick around.
Do you guys hear what?
Yeah, I can hear. It sounds like you're playing on a saucepan.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually import this week's music because I actually started working on my track, so I don't really even have an idea what to do. I listened to it once or twice, and I know it's like a very drum-heavy track this week.
It's basically just percussion, isn't it?
So I'm not sure how I'm going to make a song.
I don't know. It's some kind of what was it? Let me see if I can. Oh, you had it in front of you. Tell everyone what it is.
I have the.
It was some kind of Filipino. Was it Filipino? It said. Is that what I remember? It was called like. Been slapping it. Oh, yeah. Filipino, like indigenous, like drum music or something. It was just like it was basically just percussion.
So it's playing right now. How loud is that?
Not very.
Not very.
Okay,
no.
so
that's better. Yeah, that's good.
This is only the other stem. So Mercy only uploaded drums and other, so I guess it's split only into 2 stems.
You may as well just play the full original.
I didn't.
Oh, okay. So, it's pretty much just that, just with a bit more layers on it.
Okay, no, that's
like, it's all just percussion.
It's all percussion. I can definitely do a track with percussion, but the problem So one of the issues is going to be. Sorry, I'm trying to. I had to stop the.
I'll just do interpretive dance while you figure out what you're doing.
The problem is going to be that since it's not melodic, how am I going to tell Scalar to find notes or figure out what the scale is? Do you know what I mean?
Well, you're not. You're going to tell Scalar to give you whatever chords you feel like. So use the track for a rhythmic element, but then load up Scalar and just have it pass out some chords. It doesn't have to match because it's not melodic. It's not going to clash, right? So you can just use Scalar to. Although I guess if you wanted to show Scalar actually detecting chords, then that's something different. You might want to
very
use.
Often, a lot of the things that we are grabbing, especially when they're stems, are individual notes. So if I'm not giving it a large range of notes or even chords, very often Scalar's literally getting it wrong. It's
and it will. And
it's not a problem.
Polyphonic chord detection is like complicated.
The thing is, it's usually not a problem. it comes up with all these wacky random chords, and I click on them and listen to them, and then the ones that kind of interest me I'll drag in, and then I'm trying to figure out, well, what other things are going to go well with that? And Scalar actually says, well, could it be this scale? Could it be?
So why don't you just show Scalar, get it playing a couple of chords, and grab those chords into Koala, and then use this week's sample as a rhythmic element.
I never go backwards. I never go from something back into Koala. I always start.
Today is the day.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm not.
That's the superpower, though, right there. That's the key thing. Like at the moment, I'm putting together a live set that I need. Effectively, I need it for summer, but I need it before then as well. But the thing is, I get so obsessed with the whole live set approach that I actually enjoy making music that way a lot more than making music in a sit down and chop up samples and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I create all of the sounds that I want to use, and then I basically sequence those and play those live, and then I use the kind of dub rig setup to create the transitions and peaks and troughs and stuff. I'm not going to say verse and chorus and that, because I definitely don't do that. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
But
giving a shape to your
exactly. You'd want peaks and troughs. You want some kind of movement to it, kind of journey element. But the key to all of that is that everything does come back into Koala, because otherwise you can't control the whole. Like, it's impossible to control the whole live set unless you have something that you're centered in, and that's why Koala is.
And that's what I was saying before.
I can use it for.
Yeah, the last kind of 4 or 5 solo tracks I did have been pretty much 8 bars maximum. Like, it's just been one sequence that has been over 4 or 5, 4 or 5, maybe 6 channels, and then I've just been dubbing that on and off, adding delays, and playing melodica on top. And it's just a really fun, very quick way to do stuff, because you come up with like one idea, you have all the layers all playing at once, and then you just get straight to dubbing it. So you're just like, put 2 of them up, put the other one in, put another one out, and then you can suddenly, perform an 8-bar loop for 10 minutes and no one will be any wiser,
Completely.
So,
and the cool thing is as well, like, you can do it in different stages. So, for example, if you wanted to really go all out, you could have a whole rack of stuff that you're dubbing out. You've got your kick, your snare, your hi-hat, your toms, all on a set. Like, particularly if you've got it out to a MIDI controller.
Yeah.
And then you can play that live, and you can put, I don't know, chorus on your hi-hats and, whatever else, plenty of delay and all that kind of stuff, spring reverb, and bring it in and out and do whatever you want. And then record that as a stem in itself.
Yeah.
And then fold that back in. So you bring that back as just your rendered drum track.
Yeah.
Pick out 4 bars, 8 bars, however long it is that you want.
Yeah.
And then
definitely
put that back in and then you can redub it again, obviously, once it's all in there, and you can then build up, bring in your bass or whatever. But the most powerful thing for me is working out what's going to give me the most versatility, and only using eight channels on the mix. So I've got on the MIDI mix, I've got 8 channels, and I've got 3 knobs per channel.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 buttons per channel.
Yeah.
So then what can I do with that? It's like the limitations that I need, because AUM basically makes everything limitless.
Yeah.
So in order to build some limitations into it, that's what I've got.
Yeah.
So what can I do with those? So what can I put on a kick drum? What could I put on a snare that's going to make those interesting? Maybe it is a flanger. Maybe it's, I don't know. Like, we tried the King Tommy thing. That didn't work too much. But yeah, and then you can redo that again at the drum level. And actually, my whole perspective is I'm trying to build between like 30 and 45 minutes worth of music in one Koala session.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to do filtering on the synth to use one synth sound on a number of tracks. Otherwise, it's going to sound like, fuck, he's only got like a very small amount of sounds. I don't want it to sound like that. I want to be able to bring in some extra processing on the sound and then just take it somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the grounding that it all has. But to me, it feels a lot more like I enjoy doing that a lot more than sitting down. I haven't used Ableton for that kind of thing forever.
Yeah, and I do find that like because I've had Ableton forever and I've got a push even, but I've just found the iOS stuff just so much like less like because I can lounge on the couch and do it, and it doesn't feel as serious, and you can just be. I feel a lot more experimental when I'm just trying to. Oh, I can just plug this shit in. I can pick it up for a couple of minutes, try and do something, and then put it down again. Whereas if I'm sort of committing myself to going into Ableton, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend hours in this room, and it's like I'm giving myself a headache and blah blah blah, and it's just like it's so much easier just to futz about with the iPad for me. But I mean, I know that you're getting more into your like hardware mixers. You're getting some vintage hardware mono mixers going, which is making
Yeah, but at the same
awesome,
time, I've got like I'm building that into the live setup as well, so it has to be really like I have a very not portable version and a very portable version.
Yeah.
And the iPad is obviously the very portable version. So I've got the iPad, I've got a mixer which is controlling an analog delay and all of the levels and sends and EQs, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't need any of those things. That frees up all of those things on the MIDI controller. So I don't need delay and I don't need levels and I don't need EQ, don't need gain and stuff. I can sort all that out. So that gives me extra stuff that I can then use those dials for. You know,
well, in a bit, I'll show you like my sort of template of how I do it, because I've used some pretty advanced techniques. My one knob to rule the wall technique to actually make a single fader, do like 2 effects throws, and do like a filter cutoff sweep, which I'm using instead of mixing, which means that I can use the faders on screen to actually mix the track and make. So if I need to tweak the mix, that's independent of my performance on and off, like volume, so that if something's too loud, I can just turn it down, and I'm never going to, like in performance, like boost it too much or make it too quiet. Because the volume is controlled by the filter cutoff instead of the actual mixer fader, and then the mixer fader is just for actual mix. But yeah, we'll get there. Gerber's got something going on. Let's go put your screen back on. What you got for us?
Trying to get back to it. Okay, so
that wasn't the full screen view that you set up, but that's all good.
Should I make it bigger, or is that good?
I don't know. Is it big enough for everyone?
I don't know.
We'll see.
They'll tell me.
Sound dropping gems.
So all I really did was go to the other stem, I believe, and I literally grabbed the first two bars. So
it's muted at the moment. I don't know if that's intentional, but
it was because you guys were talking.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Is that volume okay?
Yeah.
It's very low for me, but
it is quite quiet, and especially when you talk, because you've got the ducking happening. Like you've got extreme ducking happening when you're talking. But
I can change.
No, not that. Yeah, no. The on the mic.
I could change the ducking, make it less extreme.
That's all right. Just make I mean, you just raise the threshold a little bit for that.
All right. So now when I talk, maybe. And
you could also turn up the gain reduction a little bit. It was just like when we were doing this backstage, just to check if everything was working. Gerber put on Hammerhead, and it was just like so loud.
Yeah, it was loud.
That I got him to like put a gain reduction on it. All right, let's go. It doesn't. The thing is, it doesn't need to be loud. Because otherwise it will get obnoxious, especially when we're doing production stuff and we're just putting stuff in loops.
Tell me to
for a long time.
It's loud.
Cool.
The volume's slightly different for me. So all I did was grab literally the first 2 bars of the other stem. So I don't. While we're on air, it doesn't make sense for me to be like scrubbing and finding something. So I just grabbed the first thing possible.
It's pretty samey throughout, I think. I mean, I only really just flipped through it, but yeah, there's just a lot of different percussion parts, but it's not much going on.
Is it dry, or is there like delays and stuff in it already?
I don't know.
I think it's kind of echoey.
Yeah, but not like super effective.
We're talking about the track itself, Gerber, not the string, but yeah.
Very metallic-y sounding.
Yeah, it's like a pots and pans kind of percussion.
Or like, yeah, for sure. I was thinking like gamelan or something like that. Anyway, so I just threw Scalar below it. So the audio is going to go from Koala straight into Scalar. And at this point, if you click on detect, if I hit record now, it's waiting for input. So very often you have to drag this little slider down until it starts to hear it. There we go, it's starting to hear it now. So you can already see it's not really finding a lot. finding like 2 chords.
It's going to find some freaky chords, that's for sure. And the thing is that if it then detects some kind of scale that you wouldn't have expected, that's kind of the point of this, right? Because you wanted to detect a scale that you wouldn't typically guess.
Yeah, just lean into whatever it goes with.
I kind of do tend to do that. And, if I don't like the results it's giving me, I might choose a different stem, or I might filter it differently. I mean, depending on what I'm feeding it. But like more often than not, maybe I'll start with like a bass stem. So I've got like 2 or 3 notes. That's not going to tell me more often than not, it doesn't really tell me a scale, or it doesn't. Those 3 notes don't detect chords. Do you know what I mean? So I'm really just sort of winging it, like whatever it gives me, which is what we're doing right here. So the thing I guess I would show at this point is
Super Locrian diminished double flat third scale.
I know, kind of crazy.
5/6, right? That's not one I would definitely have been able to pick out. That's for sure.
But I'll explain that. So the reason why it's coming up with a crazy scale is because it's using everything that's in this row. If I had only grabbed 2 chords, for instance, the first 2, it probably would have offered lots of other things as the first recommendation.
Right? So I don't really use Scalar.
I just want that.
Yeah.
If you actually can you delete a bunch of them and then reduce it to a less weird detection thing, or I don't use Scalar, so I don't know.
It's not really a problem. I could trash them all, and then
I guess so, yeah. And just detect 2, like 2 or 3.
In this record mode, there's no way to delete individual ones.
So. Okay. But once it's recorded and detected a bunch, can you then delete some or not?
I would say no.
Basically, it doesn't matter how many's up there. You drop them into the thing below when you want to use them. No,
not for using them, but for scale detection.
So for the detection part, I don't.
There we go.
Can I?
It's still picked the same Super Locrian diminished double flat third scale.
So I was wrong. You can, if you click Shift, you can.
The
individual ones.
Okay, cool.
So, the things I wanted to show though is that when you have these chords that it's detected, if you click them, sorry, I'm in Shift. I can't hear it.
Can you not? We can hear it.
I think it's too low for me. I think you guys hear it louder than I do.
Is your iPad volume turned up on the iPad?
I don't see that I have a way to change it. See, says speaker.
Oh, okay.
And then I don't even know. On my Mac, I can't change it either. Okay. So would it be the settings in StreamYard?
No, probably not. I mean, it's just because I'm plugging mine in through a headphone jack, so I've got the normal volume control, but it looked like yours was up on full anyway. But if you play it and remove that gain, like just pull out that gain node, does that make it more audible for you?
But it's going to blast you guys, isn't it?
I mean, try it. We'll see. It's not too loud.
No.
So what it's doing is it's using the built-in instruments within Scalar, which I've heard are good. You would think I'd have experimented with them more, but to be honest, I almost never use them. It's like, why would I limit myself to these, 20 or 30 instruments when I have thousands? Do you know what I mean?
So is this the premium version?
This is the premium version.
So what does the premium version give you? Like, what can you do on the free version?
You can detect with the free version, just like we're doing here. But I think like sequence and chord and pad, some of these things are no longer available. And I am going to show some of those things. Some of the other things that I really, really like, I think, are these perform which I always say, if you see on the chat, I'm always saying like the perform is the thing that I'm really excited by in this app.
Okay.
It's kind of like it does arpeggiation, or like something similar to that. It's like a performer is playing them. But for now, I just wanted to say, like, the default sound is this felt piano. It's got like a reverb on it, and I think there are effects within this app. I can't remember. I don't use them, so yeah, under mod.
So I mean, you could just plug it into an external synth, just so we see
That's
that
exactly what I was saying. I usually, what I'll do here is I'll do it now. I'll use felt piano, but just understand that I don't tend to use these. I've also heard complaints that some of these can be very heavy, like a lot of resources.
This is another DSP's only at 5, but I mean, you're not playing right now, but yeah.
I've heard the people complain like, "Oh, I'm using the built-in." Oh, see, that's loud. The felt piano is really soft.
It's loud when you're not talking because of the ducking.
That makes sense. Duh.
So you have to talk over it in order to make it not so loud.
All right. So I do tend to route all of this stuff to another synth. So the way you would do that is just click, say, off, and now when you press, of course, it's not going to make any noises. I don't need to in this case, but you can route to a different MIDI channel. It's pretty straightforward. It's under the settings. But what I tend to do is then bring up an instrument. I've really been excited by Volt a lot. I've been using Volt a ton lately. I was really late to purchasing it because I thought it was just a bass synth, but the actual sounds it creates are really just has a lot of distortion. There's a lot of variety in this synth, so I've been really happy I got it recently. It wasn't that expensive either. It was on sale recently. Anyway, so to route Scalar to something, I always, for anybody who's watching, I've been saying this a lot too, which is a lot of people like to route things by clicking on up at the top right. They click on this little hamburger menu, and then they do the routing. And when I first started with AUM, I used to do this a lot, and it was very unintuitive to me. I didn't really understand how it was working. And I remember having a lot of conversations with Danny, which is like, how does this work? And we would talk about like how there's MIDI control and MIDI routing, and everything was like hidden under this menu. And what I realized is if I click on this icon up here for MIDI routing, I actually don't need to ever do anything. Like, this is so intuitive to me. I don't know if it's just because I'm visual, but like I can see that Scalar stuff at the top, it leaves, and then it goes to the stuff on the right. So Scalar, I want to go to Volt. So I click at the intersection, and it shows me the beginning point and the end point, and it's routing to Volt. And so I find that if I use this MIDI routing, like, it solves all problems for me. I don't have any problems routing anything ever, just because I only use this one mode. So anyway, if we go back to Scalar now, it's now using Volt. So let's sort of talk about this. So you were mentioning it was super Locrian diminished B flat third scale, which is insanity. But there are actually detected 910 potential scales, and if you click through the arrows, you can arrow through them, and you can maybe, I don't think
find one that you recognize.
Paladin or Locrian or some of the craziest scales, but like Ionian maybe. But
Ionian's just a major.
Say it again.
Ionian is just a major scale.
Major scale, yeah, which is like less crazy than Locrian, which I think almost nobody will ever use, right? It's like everything's sharp. Oh, yeah, look, because you're like you just listen and then you play along and you don't even care what the scale.
Yeah, no, I don't need
that. Anyway, once we've determined a scale, or we've clicked through, you just click through. Here's generally what I'm doing is I'm just like clicking on these, but I tend to be actually playing the musics along, so that I can what it sounds.
Let's suggest something, right? If you go into, because you wanted to show your strumming modes and stuff, what we can do is if you show how to then stick, oh, that's quite loud.
Yeah.
If you stick a bus sense to be able to resample your playing scalar into Koala, so under Volt put in a bus send, and then above Koala put the same one.
Sound on Volt.
Second.
So what my usual process would be I would find a chord progression I like. We could just make one up.
Yeah, do it.
It should just take a second. And then I would find it.
So do you queue that up inside Scalar? Just put the 3 chords. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So you got a one.
Like a show tune.
I mean, we can different scale. It's also right. The sound in Volt isn't helping. You know what I mean?
Set up your MIDI cycling and then mess around with the Volt sounds.
Yeah, but I'm responding to your show tune comment.
Yeah.
So I might do something.
That's fine. Yeah, that's good.
Something real basic like this. And down here in the C section, there's a little looping button. And now if we were to like hit play in AUM, it'll loop through these.
Okay. So now you can turn Volt down a little bit while you're talking. Well, actually, you're going to talk over it, and then we'll duck anyway.
No, it won't, because it's not going to the same bus.
Oh yeah, good point. See, that's why you're here, Pete. You're not just a wallflower. Get it?
Look what I've done here. I've found a spotlight just by using my hand underneath the spotlight.
Oh, it's like you're on a train.
Yeah, just all these flashing past.
Stuff I did
like a really fancy train. Like
normally, I would be playing whatever's playing in Koala to help me determine what chords sound good. Do you know what I mean? Because I sort of
but you only got percussion in Koala.
I was going to say you could be playing a metronome underneath this.
Here's what I propose. Here's what I propose you're going to do. Right? Stop that a sec.
Yep.
Right. And this may not be your normal way of doing things, but let's try it. Right. What I want you to do is, if you go to, you're going to change your performance thing, whether it's strumming or arpeggiating or whatever. Right. Have that playing. Change your Volt sound and send that to resample into Koala, because that's what people want to see anyway. And then once you've done that, then you can chop that up in Koala. And this is what we were talking about before. Is like, just perform something into Koala. Then you can chop it up and do what you want in Koala.
Because sadly, there's more steps. So what I would do is I could absolutely go straight to the performance, but what I would normally do is I would play along like to it. I would normally do. So I would try to figure out what a pattern is that I actually like. And once I had something in my head, I would jump over to the sequence tab and hear where the playback. So I can change a lot. I could do all the inversions. I do tend to change the inversions because in this case we picked all things within the scale and they all sound good. But up here, sometimes they're like completely different and they need to like sort of change them to get them to be in a more similar octave, and usually messing with the inversions help. The other thing is, we didn't really cover this, but here we're doing triads, but you've got all the sevenths, all the ninths. I do find that I use the different voicings a lot because I'm looking for maybe I'll want to like loop it again, but maybe the second pass I'll want to choose a different version of one of the chords. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do tend to use the variations. Sometimes I can't find a chord I like, and if you hit suggest, it looks at the 4 chords here and it would suggest what would maybe it would recommend for the next one.
Yeah.
So I actually quite a bit.
Like as a slight, just shoehorn idea in there, right? Because what you're doing is you're trying to come up with your pattern and your inversion pattern and stuff. Whereas actually, if if you just recorded all of those inversions into Koala as one shots, you could lay all of this out in the Koala sequencer, and it would be a lot less painful and less rigid than setting up the scalar like pattern. You know,
plus you've got all the probability settings and all that kind of stuff within Koala.
I don't disagree, but I do feel like most of my process is create something in Koala and then add my own stuff on top. So that you know,
you could add your own stuff on top in Koala, is what Danny's saying.
Yeah. What I'm saying is like
not changing your.
Sorry, go on.
No, you go. Process.
I was going to say not changing the way that you're working. So not changing your approach of starting Koala, make some other stuff, put that on top. Exactly doing that. But if you were to then send that stuff back into Koala and do it there, you can do loads more to it within Koala because you've got the power of whatever synth it was that you've used, or whatever other program, coupled with the power of Koala to chop it.
This is the process I've been currently doing. So let's just go with it. I'll move through. So what I do is the playback timings, though. So I sort of showed. I was like, maybe I would have played it like. Because I figured out like what sort of sounded okay to me while the music was actually playing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I might try at this point to try to create that sort of pattern. So 1, 2, 3. So 3 repeats. I don't know what the duration is. I'm not good at this. This is where Danny probably is like, duh, it's quarter notes and it's blah blah blah. So
but this, like, just to interject again, this is exactly the reason why if you had those chords in Koala, you could just play it in and record it, and you wouldn't have to mess with it.
I find it nuts that you make it so like you remove a lot of the possibilities at this stage, rather than leaving it wide open and putting it in Koala and playing with the
possibilities though with this tool.
Sure, there is, but the thing
you're
is
still
that you're
creating like a script for them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like the number of repeats, the duration, which you said you're not too hot on, but actually you've got an idea already of the pattern you want to play. So now you've created yourself like some resistance. There's friction there where you're trying to put the thing that is already in your head into a programmed pattern when you could actually easily just directly play it into a Koala sequence if you had the inversions as pads in Koala. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, so we could pivot.
I mean, this is why we're here on this stream, right? It's kind of an intervention in a way, but also it's also
ready for an intervention. Okay,
no,
I can pivot for sure, but maybe another day would be a worthwhile to show what my process is, because I don't tend to do the way you guys are doing.
No, I'm just like,
yeah.
I'm not saying that you should change what you're doing. I'm saying like there may be a benefit to trying other things, but still, like, I mean, if you think that you can work out that pattern and program it in a timely manner, then go for it.
The thing is, I might not figure it out, but for me, it's a lot of the happy accidents along the way.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, I mean, so that is actually a really good point, though, too, because I tend to do this, like, this happens to me when I'm using Cycle, for example, as a MIDI source, right? Because it's so hard to, like, control what Cycle is doing because it's changing the actual, like you're changing duration of a step there. It makes, like, completely unpredictable patterns if you're not, like, keeping on top of the maths. So it's
I do mess up my duration sometimes, and
but what I'm saying is, so just to backtrack and give you some credit, I think, like, if you were to do what we said you should do, you would then be able to put down what was in your head way easier.
Yeah.
But you're trying to make the computer make accidents that you then curate.
Yeah, it's not even that I'm
valid.
trying to make accidents. It's also that in my head, this is the process I currently use because I like the result. And if we do it the way you said, I'll come up with a very different result, which might be
true,
might be better, might be worse. So
that's true.
The thing is, if I don't show this part, I won't be able to really get to the next step, which is
okay. All right, keep going. We're just like throwing out suggestions to the audience if they were going to follow along.
All right.
They can do one or the other.
I'm gonna hit loop again on this, and I tried to make the duration all the same. And I tried 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So we'll just see what it sounds like.
So that adds up to 2 5s, right? So just so you know,
it adds up to 2. One whole measure, 2 whole measures. It's repeating, and oh no, you're right. You're right.
Which is fine. I mean, but you're looping around a 10 beat like loop instead of a divisible by 4, which is totally fine. Like, I'm not saying that is wrong and you shouldn't do it.
Let's try that. That would be 3. Let's see what that does. I'm not hearing the individual 3 repeats of it, which is a little weird.
Could that be
by the way?
That's to do with your synth sound, perhaps. You're not.
Yeah, no, I know. We didn't even change the synth sound.
Gerber, one thing. Is the percussion part actually looping and in sync with the tempo, or not?
I stretched it.
But is that actually a 2-bar stretch? Can you play it?
Let's try. Let's check. Fuck. 1. Looks like it.
No, it's too long. Like, drag the thing on the right down like 3 peaks. Another one.
A bit more.
But another one. That's it. That's it. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Now, if you don't want it that slow, you can make it go into like 1 bar instead of 2 bars. But
we could up the tempo.
You could up the tempo as well.
I mean, I do that a lot, where I get so distracted by making music that I don't even change the BPM. 50% of my songs are 120 BPM or 110 BPM. It's just
the only thing is, and this is important for everyone, like what you had before wasn't a 4 beat or an 8 beat section. And looping it is all well and good, but then as soon as you're trying to sync other things to it, it will just make a complete mess.
Also,
that is.
You got to remember that a lot of times I like when things sort of are shifting and moving, so that would be a happy accident. But I agree. I think the right thing. Normally
it's good now. It's fine. Like, it's just, it'll make it clearer now for you to use that as a jumping off point for doing weird rhythms on top of it. But if you've got no anchor and your actual loop, like you got 2 bars, but you've got like some random percussion happening, it'll be impossible to actually record what you're planning.
It could have been cool to do 2 bars, 2 beats or something like that, and then see how that played out.
I mean, you can change that later, but I think while you're trying to figure out what your pattern for the chords are, like I know it's kind of more vanilla now because it's right, but it was impossible to hook our head around it when it was a bar and 2 beats, 3 beats, whatever it was.
It wasn't intentional though. It was that I chopped really fast while you guys were talking, and I wasn't even listening.
Yeah.
So,
well, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's good to correct those things now, because now whatever you put in the sequencer is going to sit against it to the actual tempo.
Let's try to get to make something that maybe somewhat matches, and maybe I can hear the different repeats, because I wasn't even hearing the repeats before.
Well, it would be impossible if your loop isn't actually looping properly.
So this is maybe too long. Now we hear the different thing.
Turn volt down a bit, just a little bit in the mixer. Oh no, not that much. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so now it doesn't even matter whether that's a good sound. Like I do obsess over finding a sound that interests my ear normally, and I would spend sometimes way too long going through tons and tons of presets until I find something. And sometimes I'll even change, what sound I'm using much later in the song. I'll realize it doesn't work anymore, and I'll try to find something else. But this is fine. For now, I just want to hear if it's matching the music and like what the beats are. And now I think this is close enough to what I was playing that I'm fine with it. You know what I mean? So now I would normally move on to like trying to find like what the performance method should be. So up here at the top where the perform is, if you click it, it turns it on. And if you click on the little down arrow, it's showing that it's using the basic performance of 1.
Gerber, one sec.
Yeah.
Can you just make sure that the volt output is going through your ducking? Because it isn't at the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to have to remember that for every single
There you go. Now carry on.
Thank you. Okay. So,
That's better.
So I find that this performance section is really what I like about this app. Sure, I like that it detects scales and stuff like that, but like for me, you listen to a lot of my music, it's really busy, I've got a lot of movement in it, a lot of the notes are moving around. I can't really play a keyboard, so this kind of mimics, adding some of that complexity. And so all of these performance methods I'm going to show you, there are like thousands of them in this app. There's an enormous amount.
Can you queue up different performances?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm going way too fast. 2, 3. So it's kind of like having a piano player. Like I'm somebody who can try different things and different styles. And so this is just basic performance. What I was going to show is like there's avant-garde, there's 10 in here. Adagio has got a ridiculous amount. And they all sound different. Sorry. Espresso.
I've just sorry, I missed the chat. There's from YouTube, someone anti-complot to on Sang Freud asked what software we're using. This is AUM on iOS. We're using Scalar in AUM at the moment, but mainly we're going to get around Koala Sampler. But yeah, it's AUM on iOS, and we're just figuring stuff out as we go.
I'm sorry if I'm giving you anxiety. It's interesting that I'm
in the best way.
Because like Danny and Pete are both extremely good at using software, and they have their own processes and stuff. I'm like the weirdo who's constantly looking for like a new process. Every workflow is different for me, and I do find myself running into like patterns where I use some software, a couple of times in a row, but at a certain point I'm like, well, I've used Scalar too much, and then I move on to something else. So I never really become an expert at any of them, but I do tend to like use them probably in ways they're not meant to be used. I don't know. All right, so I think you guys can see that there's an enormous amount of like performance methods, and they actually do sound different. I'm going to show one more thing on that, which is I was kind of looking for one thing in particular. So the one thing I was going to show was if I can find it. Sorry, apologies. Oh, here. So on this screen where it says resolution, I use this a lot. So resolution 1 is, I guess, what they call the default, but you've got like double time, and it's not really double time, it's more like complexity. It's like it has even more notes, and you hear them more on some of the performance methods than others, but I do find that the resolution of 1 or half is really good for like bass parts and stuff like that, things that you don't need as much movement on. So my synth I might have really super fast or with more notes, and then for my bass parts I might do something like this where it's half. So I think The other thing, the last thing maybe that I would show on this part of Scalar, there's more to Scalar. Like sometimes this is pattern 1. Sometimes I'll like duplicate my pattern and then have another pattern. So if I have an A part and a B part, and then if you go to mod, I believe, pad. If you go to this pad, you'll see all your different patterns here, and then you can chain them together. And there isn't really a song mode in here. You just sort of get them like this, where you see all your patterns, and then on your keyboard, a note on the keyboard triggers switching between them. So that actually means I need to use like a program like Helium to say like on the 8th bar, switch to pattern 2, which I do find a little annoying. It would be awesome if this...
Unless you recorded it into Koala and then just used it as a sample.
Sure. I'm just telling you what my current process is, though. So if I have an A and a B section, I'll have them listed out here, and I'm pretty much just switching to the other pattern by clicking on the 2 or clicking on a note on the keyboard.
Yeah. So I have a very quick question.
Yeah.
Does this is it just sending out a single MIDI channel on a single, like, do you have to have duplicates of Scalar?
That's the next.
That's next. Okay. Right, go.
So, because I think this is kind of the basics of how I use the app, but there's more levels, more layers to it. I would say the way I use it is with more layers. So I showed you that you can have these performance, right? But you can actually have a different performance for every single note. So down here where it says playback performance, I can, right now it's using global, but I can actually make each one a different performance. Do you know what I mean? So each individual chord is being performed in a different manner, which is really, really, really interesting. I use this a lot, and it makes the song not sound predictable and boring. You know what I mean? And maybe sometimes I'll have like part A will be one way, and then part B will be
that's cool
way, or I'll do the first 3 chords are the same performance, and then the 4th one is like the turnaround, right? So it plays it different on the 4th one. So I do this a lot, and it's really, really good. And then once I've chosen a different performance method, I can reapply that exact same one just by saying like use group 1 again. And, so now I've got group 1 and global, which was a different one. So it's really easy to mix and match those performances, and that becomes really, really, really interesting. So to answer your question, and this literally is how I'm using Scalar. Worth pointing out, if you hit humanize, it becomes much more interesting. I always turn on humanize, always. It changes when the notes hit a little bit more naturally. It moves notes. You can say change the velocity and the timing. I usually say both. You can change all of your swing. You have a lot of control over which notes are being swung and what percentage. So it's really very, very, very sophisticated, and you have a lot of control. I do use the voice lock a lot. The voice lock lets me choose what octave it's playing, or if it jumps between octaves. It's got like an open voice. So this is really good. And usually I just click on them and do I like that one? I'll stick with it. You know what I mean? So I do use these quite a bit. But now to get to Danny's question, which is once I've got it the way I like, what I do tend to do now, and how it's designed to work, is if you I don't use my trackpad very often. If I copy it, and then it's doubling the notes because they're both sending out to Volt right now. But what I do is I open up Scalar, the other version of Scalar. I'm gonna detach it from Volt, so we're not doubling the notes. And I pull up another instrument. And I do all kinds of instruments. I don't only do synths. Sometimes I'll use like a drum machine, and I'll send MIDI data to the drum machine, because then it hits on the beat and stuff, and it often sounds really good. I'm just throwing in any random thing. So now, if we run the other scalar to my next... Sorry, I'll lower that. I'm sorry.
Route that back to your ducking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. It's still really loud, right? Oh.
That's better.
Because I'm talking away. So, I mean, it's a harsh sound, but it actually sounds kind of cool.
It's also out of sync. You might want to stop and start. AUM.
Okay.
It's still really loud.
It's
like
really
that sound is super loud when you're not talking. You just turn it right down.
How about now?
That's all right. That's a bit better.
I don't know that it's a good sound. This is part of the problem with things being a little low for me. Is it's not easy for me to find a good sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like a bass. Maybe I should have chosen a different instrument.
I mean, if you transpose that by a couple of octaves, it will be a bass.
Oh, that's true. It's I didn't really give that thought.
But you can do that in just transpose it in AUM itself.
I can do that as well. Hold on, just give me a sec. What I would normally do is I would switch this to bass, and I would choose one of the performance methods. And yes, it needs to be transposed down.
Go to your matrix. Oh yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
This is how I do it. Good?
Yeah, that's better.
It's
still loud though. Like that sound is like super piercing.
It's so acidic, I think.
Yeah.
I can almost barely hear that bass. I think
okay. It's coming through.
I have to figure out why I don't have enough audio, because I can't control my volume on the computer, and I can't control my volume on the iPad. So must be.
Yeah, we'll do some off-air tests for next time.
So
Remy's in the YouTube chat. What's up, Remy? And he says it sounds like a Super Mario track. So that's...
It's because of the sound I just picked off on that. Maybe I should switch it to a different...
No. I think it was when Volt was running, actually. But
okay.
Yeah, he said that almost.
So I would normally spend a lot of time, and I would figure out what are the right performance. Like I just chose Funk Bass 1, but I would normally spend a fair amount of time figure out what the right density is of notes and what's the right performance method. And this is where I'm spending the bulk of my time on my week, is trying to find the right sound, right performance, and then that's what I'm doing throughout the week, and that's why I end up having a lot of instruments, because it's very easy for me to get instruments that sound good with each other, and I can end up having lots of different things. I'll like I said, I'll duplicate Scalar, I'll route it to some drums, I'll program in some drums, and then eventually I have a lot of instruments and I have to sequence it. And so usually at that point is where I'm running in some other tools to turn on and off and mute the different faders, and that's generally my process. So I think, though, you were suggesting we record it and maybe make some loops. Yeah.
So you can either, the thing is, you could record, you could resample it directly into Koala, or you could quantum record.
I would probably quantum record, because then we get a perfect loop.
What I would probably do though is when you're not talking, it gets pretty loud. So you could actually, when you're not talking, re-engage that gain knob or turn down the master. While we're figuring out, because the thing is, it doesn't have to be loud for you to be recording it. Although, actually, having said that, when it's down that low, it will record that quiet when you're mastering it. So it may actually be worth.
Well, I could record something else, but
yeah, just record them. So that's something useful for people to see. Actually, you can record both stems at the same time. Like you could record Volt and Dagger.
Yep.
Together, So just go over some of those quantum length settings.
How long are chord changes? So I made it 4 bars, but
I mean, it doesn't matter. Just let it run for a bit and then click it. Okay. The most important thing is quantizing the on and that. Well, the off is even less important, but quantizing the start of the pattern and then running any number of bars is the most important thing. Because then once you have it in Koala, you can trigger it on the beat and it will be in sync. After that, you don't need to worry. Like, you can just listen to it, go around the cycle a time or two. If you've got modulations, you might want to actually run it for longer than that. And then just stop the recording and then just grab that into Koala. And then you can just chop it up and do more things that you weren't expecting.
So I'll try to explain just what the sync quantum is, because I don't think Danny really covered that, where he sort of just jumped into the solutioning. But in AUM, under the metronome, there's the 3 dots for more, and there's something called sync quantum. And what you can set this to any number of bars, I think as low as 1 bar. But I usually tend to do it for the amount I want, and then I start it, and then I immediately stop it. And so it'll just continue recording until it gets to the quantum number. So when it gets to 4 bars, it'll just stop recording. It's going to automatically save them, but it's going to save them with the name of your file. So right now I've called my session StreamYard version 2. So it's going to
your camera is covering the things you're clicking on. But that's okay. Yeah.
Do I easily change that?
I'm just going to run to the bathroom real quick.
Go for it.
While you go over this.
Okay, so it's going to name everything StreamYard V2, so I might just rename this something else. And so now it'll, when I record, it's going to save it as KFC 158. I put it in a folder called KFC 158. And so anything that's armed, where we've hit the record button, when I hit record, it's going to go for this full length, which is now 4 bars. You can see it's sort of moving along. So if I hit record now, it will start to record when it reaches the beginning, which it just turned on. And if I hit stop now, it's going to keep recording until it reaches the end. So it just gave me a perfect 4-bar loop of these 2 instruments. So now if we go into Koala and I import, now I believe I'm in my downloads folder, but actually I need to go to thinking.
Just press the cloud.
Is it the cloud? I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's in the cloud. It's in your. Have you got audio share?
Yeah, I've got audio share.
Yeah, sorry, it's in the audio share folder.
Cloud took me back out to see the normal file structure. So as Pete was saying, because I have the program called Audio Share, I get to see the stuff that's in the Audio Share's files directory. If you don't have the Audio Share application, this doesn't show up here. And you literally have to, in AUM, you have to export out each sound, which I could show, but I would recommend, this is one of the only reasons why I highly recommend people buy Audio Share, because it just gives you this convenient link. So I click on Audio Share, there's my recordings, there's the KFC 158, and it actually named them based on the number of the fader and the instrument name. So we can load each one, I guess.
You can select them both at the same time. And you can normalize it. I know it's quiet, but it doesn't matter. Actually, you're probably best not to normalize it, because it's still going to be loud. It's probably at the right volume now.
No, I don't know. This one's loud, and the other one's just not loud. This one needs to be loud.
It's just the sound is cutting as well, so...
This one.
Oh, no, it is quiet.
It's really normalized. Let's see what happens.
It's like a magic trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. All right. So, what you're thinking at this point?
Well, the only thing I guess that turn off one shot, I hate one shot. I mean, I have to deal with this every week with Funk Moon Camp. Those guys love one shot. I fucking hate one shot. I don't know why people use one shot. It's so annoying.
More often than I use.
I mean, there are very few times I want one shot on. The rest of the time, I just draw the like you just did there.
I just had to draw it across. I don't normally draw it across.
No, yeah, I know, but it also means that if it's like the thing is that sometimes you resample a thing and it's like 60 bars long, right? Of just like you noodling, and well, when I say you, I mean Potato Moons specifically. And then you just if you put it as a one shot in a pattern and it's re-triggering, that's fine. But then when you switch pattern, it continues to play the entire 60 bars of like noise underneath. So then you have to like find a way to stop it, or
yeah. I guess I don't run into this problem that often, but partially it's because I'm just doing something simple in Koala and then adding stuff on top of it in the AOM.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a benefit. I'm just more like that's my usual process, so I don't run into it as often. But
anyway, the point being is that using that quantum recording means that the recording of those stems started exactly on beat, which meant it's a really easy process for you to then use it in your sequence.
Yep.
Won't you have like all of the other stuff still playing on Scalar, or did you mute those channels?
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, it is still.
Because I don't usually do this process. Thank you.
That's why you're here. You're here for an intervention.
Thank you.
I was say you can mute those, or you could just pull the scalars out of the way, or however you wanted to do it.
Yeah, I could do that as well. I think this will work. So let's get back into Koala. And the volumes are wrong as well, which is going to be hard for me to fix. So this is the bass, I guess, is loud. The thing is, I'm building on a faulty foundation because I didn't hear.
Well, I mean, don't worry about. I mean, it was really like the whole thing until now has been just to show that process. Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to continue.
True.
I mean, we can jump over to the other stuff if you want. If you're happy to move on.
I'm totally happy to move on. I guess the better question is that I think that gives a pretty good sense of what the
definitely. We know how to Gerber and Scalar.
Yeah, it's how to Gerber and Scalar is very accurate. Yeah. It's also things that are really exciting. Like it's a huge app and you can do so much more with it. I just find I don't do that. You know what I mean? Like I just use the things I showed. I don't really use a lot more.
See, you use loads more than I do. I literally use I use it for I identify stuff, but I use it for like circular fifths, and I record the chords into Koala, and sometimes I'll just identify the notes and play them in Koala.
Yeah,
I barely even use Scalar, to be honest. Even though I use it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Like I scrape the surface. You could probably do what I do with the free version.
Yeah,
probably could because it does the chord detection stuff, I think.
And that's the thing. I think if you do the chord detection stuff, you get it to play the chords out, but you don't need it to do all the sequencing stuff. I mean that it does. I mean you do. You like to work that way, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I'm saying
performance techniques are so good. I just don't even know what to tell you.
But then you can record a bunch of performance techniques as samples in Koala. I think that's the way I would go about it. If I at this point, like, just because then you have the versatility of like not having to manage 15 different sequences, like when you want something to stop and start and stuff like that.
Yeah,
just gets.
I guess I found techniques to make that a little bit easier. You know.
Yeah.
See, for me, basically, what I'd be doing now is if this was me, if I was creating this track. So I delete the scalars, I delete Volt, and I delete Dagger. And then I would be putting out those sounds out onto the tracks. So I would put the Volt back onto the Volt track. Like I would put a Koala in that node underneath.
Right. Yeah.
And then I would start applying like filters and stuff like that. Obviously, I'd chop up. So one of the channels would be for bass and one of them would be for the melodies. And then I would start putting filters and various effects on those sounds. I'm a lot more interested in crafting what I want the sound texture to feel like,
So I do
rather
that
than
too.
the notes.
So the next step for me would be to start applying EQ and effects on all of these things. I do go crazy with that, and then I'll start bussing them out and adding effects on the buses. And like I usually end up having 30, 40, 50 nodes of effects and stuff. I do tend to go crazy with it. What I do.
That's the other thing. I think like with all these processes, like of having 40, 50 nodes, it's like if they're not constantly modulating, you can bounce them into Koala, basically. And then just remove all the plugins. And then if you're actually collaborating with other people, they don't need your plugins because all of that sound as you. Yeah, I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying
I'll flatten stuff down. I think I had mentioned that sometimes I'll do multiple patterns and I'll switch between patterns, and I do that. And then I'll have to use Helium or some other tool to switch between those patterns. But more often than not, I'm not doing that. More often than not, I'm just running one pattern, and I end up having lots of different instruments. And the way I craft my song is by muting individual instruments at different times. So that's how I'm creating different sections. Do you know what I mean?
See, the way that I use Koala in terms of Scalar, rather, in terms of generating MIDI, is I would then record it into Atom. So I would take the output that you sent to the synth, I would take it into Atom and record the notes there. And then I don't need Scalar. It's exactly the same way that I would use Riffler. So Riffler is going to generate me a melody or whatever it's going to make. I'll record that into Atom, and then I'll play about with it in Atom and go like, yeah, that's close. I'm going to change that little bit there. I'm going to lose this note. Whatever something generates for me, I tend to want to strip it down further than what it is.
I never do that.
Simplify it.
I don't ever do that.
That's definitely
the nice thing. The thing about Atom, the nice thing is, you were saying about you'd use something else to switch between patterns. You could just use Atom, you can stack it's.
Yeah,
it's like Ableton. It's clip launching effectively.
I say I use Helium to switch patterns because it would be really easy to do that. But Helium's the same thing as Atom, so I could export out the MIDI. I believe you can export the MIDI right from Scalar, right? I think there's a way to say export. I haven't done it, but I'm pretty sure you can. So you could record it, or you could just save it as a file and import it in. Do you know what I mean? And you could edit the MIDI data, like you're saying, because you want to strip it back. I just tend to not do that. If I want there to be less notes, I'll run it through a tool that removes a certain percentage of the notes and stuff like that. I do tend to do that as well.
So I think that the next step, and I think a good segue to what I was going to talk about potentially, is taking out all of that automated patterning out of it and having just a bass sequence or a set of loops that are playing all at the same time, and putting hands on either a mixer or like a virtual mixer to create an arrangement in a dub sort of style, not genre dub necessarily, but just the fact that you're then using the fading and mixing of things as the way to perform the track. So I don't know if you want to switch over to my screen, and I'll just talk about my basic.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. So I mean, what I was going to do was I can very, very quickly go over what I did in a YouTube video recently, but say that you have, and I'm just, hopefully it's helpful that I'm using a mouse so you can see what I'm clicking on. But so if I just have this as the, I guess, I don't know if we need a master out necessarily. I'm not even necessarily going to play sounds through this, but I just wanted to show how A, B, and C mix bus. Let's make C the master. So I never use a mouse with AUM. This is so alien and weird.
I ran.
It's really, really weird. So I'll go to C for the master. Okay, so what we wanted to do, and what we were discussing about how you potentially might do your like beat tape as such, right? is if we have an audio thing that we're going to load Koala into. Yeah. Where are we? Oh, and the mouse is upside down as well. Why is Koala not even? Hang on, I'm just going to use my finger for a minute. Okay, so now the way I do this, and I showed it in my video, and I'll just very quickly go over it now. I'm going to remove the output from Koala so you can't even hear it. What's that? No, you can't. Oh, you can use that plug. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, actually, you can't. Just replug it, Anna. Sorry, everyone. If you replug it, it shouldn't kill anything, hopefully, with any luck. Right, so now, what you're saying when we've talked about it before, Gerber, is that you don't know why I bother doing this, because it's so much easier just to add a channel, add a multi-out, and then duplicate that multi-out. And then you've got your outputs set up for Koala, which is the quick and easy way of doing it. But it hopefully, possibly will become more clear why I don't do it this way in a second. So what I'm going to do is I've got my A and B. Let's say that's going to be, A is like atmospheric stuff, whatever it might be. I don't know. I'm not even going to bother renaming it because we don't even know what we're going to do. But A and B, it could be 8. So I normally have 8 set up. So I've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Is that 8? Yeah. So I do that. And now my face is in the way of the thing. So let me just move that. Oh, gosh, that's the whole thing. One sec. I'll move this over here. That plus icon. Right. So what I do now is add a send. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm sending A, and I make it post. But well, actually, this doesn't need to be post. But that's now sending the main Koala output to A. Okay. Mm-hmm. If I played something in Koala, which I could
faster to load a song.
Yeah, probably. What should I load? Whatever. I don't even know what. Right. What we got, and it won't be in the right tempo, whatever it was originally. But let's see. Do you hear anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't. That's annoying.
I hear it like the C stacks, but it sounds like it's very soft.
Right, let me just have a look here a minute.
Kind of cool.
Okay, hang on, you hear that? I can't hear it at all.
It's not very loud, but I like it.
Yeah, it's not loud, but I like it.
I've got no idea. Oh man, this is annoying. Hang on. So what is happening here? Let me just troubleshoot for 1 second. That sound is coming through there. That I need to go to. Oh yeah. Okay, I can hear it now. Oh, it's that weird. Okay.
It's like a sweet stack.
I think this is what actually ended up being my sample contribution for the sample thing.
Cool.
Anyway, right. So
you
can hear that. It's not too loud or annoying or anything.
There's no danger of being too loud.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so I've got something going. Now it's on A. It's coming out of A. I'm going to put a Koala out instance into the same channel. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is well, there's no output. So let me use the mouse so you can see what I'm clicking on. This output is off, so it doesn't matter what I put in here. It's not going to be audible. Okay, but what this allows me to do is I'm going to add the send to B. And now anything that I send to channel 2 will come out of this node and therefore come out of B. Okay. And so I do that for all 8. And all on one fader, and they're all going, channel 1 here is going to A, channel 2 is going to B, and then I can add another one, channel.
Okay, you're a genius. I would have never thought to do this.
Yeah, so this then goes to C. if I can figure out how to use
I
my
see why you
mouse.
would want to do this every week.
Well, I mean, you will see even more why I want to do it when I actually get to why I do it. Let me just send this to... Oh, no, sorry, not C. C we're using for the master. So I'll just send that to something else. Make that D. Okay. And then make this go to the master. Just C. Okay. And then what I need to do... Why is that not letting me...
You haven't made just send D.
Yeah, no, it's just that the... Oh, yeah, okay, I'll change that now. So this needs to be D. Yeah, no, that's right now. A, B, D, all going to C. C's the master. And I've got A, B, D going here. Now, I would continue doing this. I won't bother now, but I'll continue doing this for eight channels, right? Now, let's save this as something. So I'll do this as live stream tutorial. Now, okay, what I want to do, let's first go into some of these sounds. And so if I can't hit edit without triggering them without my finger like set up. So let's just see what we actually have here. Like, I'm going to stop that. So we've got... Can you hear that? It's really quiet, isn't it?
It's really quiet.
Okay. Let's say that's our C sound. Okay. So I'm going to send that to out. So now I'm not using the Koala buses. I'm just going straight into main out 2, 3, or 4. So I want that to come out of channel 2. This percussion I want to come out of channel 3. That I can send out of channel 2 as well. And that will leave on channel 1. Okay. Now if I play, it's all coming out of these 3 channels. So I can... That's just the percussion.
I'm not sure what it might be yet. What?
You're not sure of what?
You didn't tell me what our destination was going to be, so I don't understand what the benefits yet. I'm like, you're doing all this complicated stuff to do what you showed I do easily every week in one.
Well, so yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. So this is the baseline. So the thing is that once you have it like this, you don't need to necessarily even sequence. Like I've got this one thing, right? And I can turn it up and down. Now, here's the benefit. The big jaw drop moment. Okay.
Oh, I'm excited for it.
Okay, right. I've saved this. I can't see your faces anymore right now. Hang on a minute.
They just know that they're gazing at you adoringly.
Adoring.
Oh, hey, Tatsumaki's in the house.
Yeah, I was going to ask the question.
So so did we have a question quickly?
Yeah, well, it had to do with how are we streaming our iPads onto the video stream.
In my case, this is what I'm doing. I'm airplaying the screen to my PC. So it's a completely different process for Gerber because he's got a Mac. But I'm using a program called 5K Video Player, which basically turns your PC into an AirPlay receiver. Then, before connecting my headphones, I connect the screen, and you have to be in AUM before you connect, otherwise something craps out. If you're on an iOS home screen and do this, it will crap out for some strange reason. So go into your AUM screen, then connect your screen to your PC, which is going through OBS. Using screen sharing, and finally stick your headphones, or in this case I've got it going into the PC as a separate output, into the PC as an audio. So there's not that much, like there's almost no delay. And if I wasn't in a chat with you guys, I would go direct into my headphones and I'd have no delay, but I would split that off to the stream and then there'd be no delay for me and you would hear what you're seeing. All right. Anyway, that's a quick overview.
The same question for iOS and Mac because somebody else on the stream might be curious. So for Mac, it was pretty easy. I just used a USB-C cable from the iPad out into my Mac, And then when I ran OBS, it actually just shows up as a video source. It says iPad, and it actually handles the audio and the
Oh shit! Does the audio too?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing we had a lot of trouble splitting that off. But if you're not actually trying to do anything fancy behind the scene, then that could be a solution.
I got USB.
Yeah, and I'm making it sound
iPad.
Straightforward, but it actually was more complicated because I was trying to combine.
Slick, though.
All right, let's get to the jaw drop moment here. If there is going to be one, I don't know. But all right, so fucking get to it. So now I've got the plus icon here. Okay. Now instead of if I was to duplicate this channel here, it would duplicate Koala, but it would not duplicate all of these connections. Okay. They would all still be connected to the first Koala instance. And if you've got 8 channels already set up for outputs, then that's not what you want to do. Now, the mouse won't let me drag my screen around for some reason. I don't know if that's an AUM thing or not, but anyway, if I click plus, and instead of creating a new channel for my second instance of Koala, I click import. I've got live stream tutorial, which is the one we just saved here. And I click just channel 1, right? If I import this channel, it's a duplicate, including all of the buses into...
So it's an AUM feature that Jonathan added, which lets...
Oh, that's been around forever. I think that the import thing has been around forever.
Right? You can import faders from another project into this project. But in this case, you're just importing the first fader from the same project, but it works.
Correct. And the reason for that is now, when I imported it, all of this instance's Koala multiple outputs are already coming out of my buses. Okay. So it means that here I can load a different song. Let me load a different song here. And I mean, again, this is not prepared.
Now you're DJing between 2 sessions.
Exactly. And this is where I was going to get to. And this is what we discussed at the beginning. What I want to do is not just have a crossfader for a single stereo output. I want a crossfader per channel for my dub mix, right? Because it means that you can then dub in the drums and other layers from track 2 over the atmospherics of track 1, and then mix out those things, by mixing what is going into those outputs. And the way to do that, let me just play. This is going to sound like a complete mess. Like if I disable the main Koala node, it should just not do it. Okay, good. Right. So now if I go to here, I don't know what this might be an FMC track, and I usually have this off as well. Sequence snapping. When I'm sequencing, I have sequence snapping off because when I'm recording, and I can, if we have time, we're already like an hour and a half in. If we have time, I can show you a Mozaic script that I ended up using every week now. I'll show you that maybe. Hey,
that's about this is too complicated.
It's too complicated, but I mean, that's why we're here.
It is complicated. I mean, maybe it's worth restating. So I think maybe what you didn't provide is some context to what would be on the A bus, the B bus, the C bus.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a second then as well. But say I've got this here. I've got a 4-track here, right? Okay, you can hear that?
Yeah.
And that's running on a... I don't even know what track this is. But anyway, this is running on this is just like an 4-bar loop, okay? Now, the big issue here is trying to identify what is what out of this mess of samples. So what I would do is... Okay, let's say these ones are drums. I'll send that out to 2.
I still forget that you could do that,
Yeah, I actually don't do it all that often. But yeah, if you hold edit down, you can select more than one pad, and then you can change certain things. You can't change their EQ, but you can change what output they go to, change what volume and pitch. I do realize this is quite complicated for the uninitiated, but it's not that complicated once you get your head around it. And so just listening to me drivel on and not kind of don't expect to be able to use all this stuff straight away, but you might just find one little nugget of an idea that might be like, oh yeah, actually, this is how you do that. Or like, Danny mentioned this, so I'm going to go and ask him how to do it properly. But I'm rushing through it, obviously, as well, because I don't want this to take forever. But if I just send these two out too, I don't know what any of this stuff is. Let's just send all that out to out 3. I'm actually using buses, so we may lose some of the stuff in there, and that's on one shot. Right. Okay, well, let's see what we've got here. So now, if I solo D, I didn't send anything to. Okay, I've got this beat coming through B. And almost nothing coming. What's going on there? Where's all that bass coming out of then? Any ideas?
No.
I'm not sure where that bass is coming out of.
Go back to the channel again.
Which one? Where?
A, B, and D. That's all good.
A, B. So the weird thing is that now I've got everything soloed. I should only really be hearing what is soloed, right? But when I should be hearing everything, but when I unsolo it, I'm hearing a bunch of extra layers. So I'm not sure what's happening there. Anyway, let's not get too bogged down in that. But the point is that it's already going out of those other outputs. And if I enable... Now we've got 2 tracks playing at the same time. Obviously, they're BPM synced to a certain extent, so they kind of work together. Yeah, but I've got them all going at the same time, okay? Yeah. So what I want to be able to do, and this I'm sorry, is going to get more complicated. But what I need to do is be able to mix on an individual send. I need to send this up and this down at the same time for every send, right? So the way I would do that, you can, if you've got a hardware mixer, it's much easier because you can just map that to the reverse of it, and you're done. But I'm just going to bring up Drambo just because it will give me a knob. It will give me a knob to work with. Okay.
I don't know if people realize, but you can assign multiple knobs to the same exact thing, and then in AUM you can tell it one of them to do it the inverse, so that when you move the slider up on one, it moves the other one down. So
yeah. So I mean, I'm going to use this in the most basic way possible here. Like when I just load up Drambo on a MIDI channel, I've got the MIDI to CV by default, which we can ignore for now, and the MIDI output. This is the most important thing. If this wasn't here, you'd have to add it. So you'd go to MIDI output, and that's going to MIDI out and Omni at the moment, but channel 1. Okay, now when you load up Drambo into a MIDI channel, it's already got a bunch of tracks set up, and each one is going to an individual channel. Okay, now going back to this matrix, I want to control those AUM faders. So what I need to do is send the Drambo into the MIDI control of AUM.
Mm-hmm. And
I touched on this before, but basically anything that is available at the AUM level on a plugin. So if I go over to Koala, if we look at what is visible to AUM in this list, anything mapped here is controlled through the MIDI control channel, but anything that is controlled directly in Koala, so anything that is in this, and it's the same for any plugin. Basically, any plugin that has got its own internal mapping that isn't necessarily exposed to AUM, in here you would go to map MIDI, and like this note, C2, C#2, if I was to put a keyboard into MIDI control, it wouldn't do anything because these aren't exposed to AUM. These would need a direct control to Koala. So in that case, I could control those notes and sequences by sending the keyboard directly to Koala, not to the MIDI control, because they're not exposed to AUM. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to stop mapping MIDI, and I'm just going to go ahead in just... So I need the most basic knob to send a CC, all right? So I'm just going to go to CC generator, multi. If you don't use the multi version, then it only just gives you one knob. And who wants one knob? Eh? Not me. That's who. So what this does is this knob is, if I double tap it, its name is 1. So let's say, well, I mean, it's actually going to be 4 channel 1. So let's just leave it as 1. Double tap it, CC number 0. If I add another one, this is also CC number 0. So I'm going to change that to 1 because I'm going from 0. Actually, for ease of use, let's call that 2, right? And call this one 1, not 0. So I'm basically setting up a knob for each one of these. So I've only got 3 layers, so I'm just going to set up 3 knobs. Set that as knob number 3. Right? He's such a child. Right, so now we've got 1, 2, and 3. Now the thing is, if you've got a MIDI controller, then you can just use MIDI learn for this, and it's much easier. But in my case, I don't have MIDI learn because the MIDI learn window in AUM disappears when you try to use a separate window. So I need to manually do this. So send amount, I'm going to put to channel 1, which is what it was on, and this is on CC1, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to do the same thing on the other channel. So I'm clicking, let me use the mouse so you can see what I'm clicking on. I click on this channel name here, and then this little mixer icon here. Then I go to bus A, send to bus A. Okay, that's the node I'm targeting. And I go to send amount, and I change that. But I'm going to use the same control. Okay,
invert the
except what you can do here is remap it, so you can reverse it here, or I don't know how to exit it. Hang on. So, or you can just actually, there's no reverse. So anyway, one way to reverse it is to do this.
That's what I do.
Right.
If people don't use this, they should. I use this a lot.
Well, so I'll show you another way to do it in a second if you're still awake. But
limiting the range of the CC values I use.
Yeah, that's right. So this is basically remapping a CC value coming in from 0 to 127 to whatever you set this to be. So if you want, for example, and I'll show you a quick example. If I say I want this to be the channel controls volume mixer, so I'll put that on channel 1 and I'll put it on 2, which means the second knob should control it. Okay, and it does. Now, the 100% to 0 maximum on this mixer is set to -6 dB in my settings. But if I go in here and change these controls to map, it's going to 0 to 50, which is -6 dB. If I turn that up to 0 dB, okay, so you see it changing on the right. Now this range will go up to 0 instead of -6. So basically what that's doing is allowing you to remap the output of any... Can't believe I figured any of this out. It's actually not that complicated if you're not completely new to it. So,
you can't imagine that Tatsumaki. I use this all the time. Like this specific thing, this whole idea of a range of numbers, that the CC values, it might seem like it's geeky or something, but if you have like an LFO or something that's modulating a knob, being able to say like, oh, it's too squelchy or it's too loud, like there's such an easy way built into AUM to control that. It's insane. Yeah. It's like so.
Okay, so what I want to do, I want to remove that because it won't let me drag with my mouse for some reason. So I'm just going to drag that and remove it, just so we're not controlling the volume with that second knob. But what I want to show you we did with that map ranging is that now when I turn this up and down, A mix is going up and B mix is going down on channel 1, okay? And that's going straight out to A, B, and C. And obviously, well, not obviously, but if I was to save this again and load in another copy of this channel, all of this mapping is already there, right? And this is where it becomes super useful for me because I like to make things complicated. But all of these channels, this is why I use a template, Gerber, because you're always like, I don't like using the template because it's prescriptive and da-da-da-da-da. I agree with you to the most part. Honestly, I really do. But also, all of this really boring, geeky shit that you don't want to be doing every week is already done for me in my template.
If you're not going to use the template, it's why the template is kind of the ultimate thing. It's basically, imagine you've got a hardware studio with all this shit in. And to go back to what Tatsumaki was saying, the reason why we figured this stuff out is because we spent a lot of time having to do it with hardware shit, and it is so much more simple to do it with this, and so much more powerful. Exactly. If you're doing it with physical wires, it's a fucking nightmare.
If you're patching modular, like even just like people who are just into modular stuff, is just like to only you can't save a preset. You have to either keep your shit plugged in or replug it in a particular way to get that sound back. And this basically just saves all that stuff out.
See,
and
I feel like it's more than that. Imagine if you went into your studio and every single time you'd finished, like the last time you finished, you'd taken everything and unplugged it all and boxed it all up. That's what it's like going into AUM without having a template ready to go.
A template. Well, and the thing is, I know it will probably like blow your mind if I actually show you my actual template. that I use every week. It's actually not much more like we're stepping up to it here, and I know this is pretty advanced stuff, but it's good to know it exists, right? Anyone who thinks this is too complicated, know it exists, and then if you eventually find yourself in need of it, you know where to go, which is either the replay of this beatcast or come and speak to me about it.
But also, they look as complicated as yours, Danny, but they're not.
But the funny thing is, in terms of the majority of complications here, it looks more complicated because of Drambo. Yeah, but if you had a physical piece of hardware, like a physical controller that you would just map in, you wouldn't have to do this stuff because it's got, like Danny said, it's got MIDI learn. So you just kind of go like, okay, I want this to control it, and you move the fader, and then it's automatically mapped.
Yeah, that's right.
I never used hardware, so I understand the analogy. I understand with modular, like you spend hours patching it, and then if you want to do something else, you got to unplug it. And then if you ever want to go back, it's gone, or you had to have written it down. So I understand the concept, but I really only started in software, and I just accept that this is like better, but I also learned things as I needed it. It's not like
So
I learned each thing I needed to do. I asked Danny, how do I do it? And he told me, and then I built on that knowledge. So while it seems complicated because you literally are jumping in the deep end with Danny right now, this stuff isn't that complicated. You learn the basic individual ideas, and as you need it, you figure out how to do this more complicated stuff.
Like all we've done here is we've got a crossfader that now goes between channel 1 and channel 2 on each of those sides. That's all we've got. So we can have one on, the other on, or a blend of the two, somewhere between 0 and 100%.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it's doing. And it seems complicated because there's a lot of little things I'm clicking on along the way. But yeah, it's not. This is not complicated in the scheme of things. If that makes you feel any better, it probably won't. But
I tried to this is context in the chat for why you were doing this, because I think if you came in, this would seem crazy complicated. But the way I explained it was,
but then
if you wanted to crossfade between two songs like a DJ does, this is really easy. You would do two of the things that Danny showed. You'd have two faders, and you'd have the one A sends. Like you'd only have one thing sending. But what Danny is doing is like taking the idea of crossfading between one song to another level. He's saying like, you can choose whether the drums from song A and song B come in at different times. You can have the synth in one song drop out while the synth of another song comes in, and then have the drums from one song come in while the other one goes out, and then have the atmospherics come in and out. And you have control with a slider on when those things come in. So in a live performance, you're like, you're crossfading between songs, but you have so much more control over that crossfade. So it's like better than a DJ can do. Which
let's see this in context, right? So now I've got, this is now only track 1 you're hearing, all 3 layers. But if I start mixing out, now I've mixed out layer 1 of track 1 to the first layer of track 2. I mean, they're not in sync really, and they're not meant to be played together, these 2 particular songs. But what that means is that I can mix and match the 3 layers, and usually I would have, my main template has got 8 of these layers all ready to go, all MIDI mapped, and with an extra layer of complexity because I've got, like, everything is controlled by one knob. Do you want me to show you guys, or is it just going to be too much?
What I would say is you would send me that template and I would think it's the coolest thing in the world, but I'd have no use for it. So this lesson actually makes me understand why you would do all that work.
Well, so the other nice thing about this setup, and this, like, before I go on to anything even more complicated, is that basically the way I look at it is those 8 channels are my master 8 outs. Everything I ever bring into AUM is going to go through one of those 8 channels, and that goes to your master, okay? The master can have other stuff on it, but it means that if I want to add a synth, and I'm not using all 8 channels, I'll just load up a sound here, like, let's say, whatever, Mariana. At the moment, it's going directly to the output, but instead, what I'm going to do is, I'm like, okay, I've got some processing already happening on channel C, which this would suit. So I'll go to bus A, right? In this case. And now when I play this, it's going through, it's set to, let me just do something here. Right, this is going down the rabbit hole. Now this is where I might use this list over the matrix. I never do, like, I rarely do, but if I'm doing something really quick,
not even
then
quick. I have always the matrix.
So this here, like, I'm using my mouse again. So if I click on this hamburger, what Gerber showed at the beginning is that this input relates to this top layer, and this output relates to the destinations, which is down the right. So if I was to connect cycle to Mariana like this, that's exactly the same as going in here and going to here and going, well, nothing on the input, but on the output, it's already connected to Mariana, see? Now, if I was to, so when I load the thing, I might not bother going to the matrix. I'll just hit the hamburger, hit the output, go to Mariana, and it's done. If I look at the matrix, I see that it's done exactly the same thing.
It's not that I don't understand it. It's that people who are just learning AUM some of them can get confused. And I feel like by showing MIDI routing, if you only limit yourself to MIDI routing, it's much less confusing. That's all.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it took me a while to figure out that these settings were actually the same ones as the ones here. It's just a different way of getting to the same thing. So anyway, I've got a cycle here. I'm just going to, just so something's playing, okay? I can't hear you. Are you saying something?
Yeah, I was saying, have you tried Neon Sequencer yet? It's really cool.
I haven't. No, I haven't. And this is very similar to that, I think, because you just add layers that you want to change. So, for example, I want to change the the pitch is already in there, I think. All I want to do is, at the moment, I want to just make it play. So you can transpose it like you showed before, but I'm just going to transpose it here from the bass octave into cycle. Okay, so mean, this is hideous to listen to, but because I can mix it with either track and it's going into A. Okay. Now, if I wanted to mix that, I would put that here. So I would put that bus A there. But now I've got a third thing that I can mix into that same thing, and I can control it using the same controls if I needed to. But that's the thing with my template, is that let me just get rid of that. Is that any synth that I add, or any other sound source, drums, whatever, if I add other drum computers, drum synths, or another Koala instance that's got drums in it, that I want to route into my drums layer, right? So when I'm doing stemming for FMC, I usually have like, and this, I know Pete can speak to this in a minute because his thinking is slightly different for live performance. But when I'm recording stems, my first channel is always a kick, second channel is always a snare, third channel is always a hi-hat, fourth channel is always percussion, fifth channel is always bass, sixth channels, seventh and eighth are all samples that are then mixed in different ways just so they don't overlap each other too much, right? But they're kind of like things I juggle, okay? Now, Pete, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but you think of it more of like a frequency range that you're splitting across your faders, right?
Yeah, so I kind of came from doing it with 4 channels because I just had a 4-channel mixer. So I would, if I'm doing it with 8, then yeah, kick, snare, hi-hat, and then percussion maybe, or it depends what the track, but yeah, the first four tracks, 4 channels are going to be drums, and then I take those drums into a submix, so that then I'm actually only using the drum as a drum bus. So then I reduce it down to 4 channels anyway. So then I've got a drum channel, a bass channel, a mids channel, and effectively like a dialogue and one-shot sort of channel, and that's all I need to be entertained, if you know what I mean.
That
keeps it interesting. As long as I've got a delay, as long as I've got plenty of effects on there, then that's all that I really need. And it does come from the really simple. Like I don't play. I suppose I do play dub sometimes, but in general, I'm not playing dub, but I'm playing in a dub style.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I've been discovering and really enjoying, is like a dub style can be any music, but it just means that you've got a fixed amount of channels coming out and you can play with them as an instrument. And you can play with the effects as an instrument.
So I was going to ask you that's the next step that you haven't really covered yet, which is where are you putting your effects and how are you controlling those effects?
Okay. So the way I do it is probably what you might consider to be too complicated, but
can't wait.
I'm going to. I'll show you. Okay, what I'll do, because we're already 2 hours in. I'll quickly
bring your template.
I'll show up the template and just show it blank and talk about why it exists, and then I'll load one of my recent tracks.
Perfect.
And show you what it looks like. Okay.
Great.
So in that template context, and the thing is, Campy was just saying, and one of those channels is because usually I'm exporting these stems, sending them to Campy. Yeah, I know I'm shouting. I'm presenting here. I'm walking here. So he says one of those stems is always empty, and the synth has always got a kick in it. But in my defense, right, another thing is a lot of the time when we're using Koala, and especially using the Koala keyboard mode, is that a kick might become a percussive element or like even a melodic element because you're using it like up high and using the same sound down low, and it might be a snare or some other kind of element that sort of would fit into 2 of those categories, not just one. But let me just clear this and load my template. And I know that when you saw this in the video, it scared you, Gerber, right? But basically, this is exactly what I was showing before. And the only reason, like what my rack is doing, is it's giving me faders as though I had a hardware controller. That's all it's doing. these tactile controls are instead of touching these directly, and the reason for that is that they actually control a bunch of things. As I go up this sweep, you'll see that it's like it's mixing in effects 1, then it's mixing in effects 2, then it's fading out the track. Okay, and that's all controlled in Drambo with graphical, like basically each one of the knobs, each one of these colors. I'm just going to go. I'll skim over this because it's probably not. It's too much, right?
Trick, right? Like,
but basically, this one knob trick is that it's exactly the same setup as we were just doing, except what this knob here on the left, which is controlled by my fader, is sending out 3 different shapes, and those shapes are changing.
Yeah,
those shapes are changing these effects, right? CCs, and that means that like. The third one, for example, is my mute level.
Just 1 second, Danny. Just bring that back a sec so that we can see effects 1 as well. That visual image there is the best way to describe what the 1 knob is doing. So just from my perspective, so you can see, if you see on effects 1, you see as you're moving across, you can see that on that far left where effects 1, where the envelope starts, that's the beginning of what that bit of the knob is doing.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
That's at full 100% by the time you get to the next bit on effects 2, and that triggers that envelope. And then that's gone its full curve by the time you hit the mute, which is the last bit of the knob. Just to explain to anybody who doesn't understand
and the
way that's
Thank you.
Like a little bit slower, where the first one, EQ1, is like quite fast. And
so the reason these are the defaults is because 1 usually is what I might, if you think of it as a dub context, 1 might be my spring reverb, right? So when the knob is down, which is, okay, this is a bit weird because I tend to have everything on when the knob is at the bottom. When the fader's at the bottom, everything's on. When it's at the top, it's off. You can reverse that if that fucks with your brain. But basically, at the bottom of the fader's throw, like the first kind of quarter of it, nothing is happening. Like it's not turning it down. It's not increasing effects. It's just the safe zone of it being on without any effects and nothing else is happening. Then as I ease it into like whatever that is, a third, right? Now I've got spring on with 100% signal, but no delay. Delay would be effects 2, right? Then I've got both spring and delay on at this like 2/3 mark.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to then mute it, but let the delays continue while it's muted, I just bring it up to 100. So then you see the third channel, which is the mute, is fading out. And I could use that either on the fader, or in this case, I'll show you why, but I use it on a low pass filter sweep, which is this node here. It's got no resonance on it, but basically it means that as I change this, it go like when it's full, you're seeing the full signal through. When it's down, it's basically cutting everything, right? Yeah. And everything in between is basically, it's like a filter sweep rather than a gain volume thing going from top to bottom where the volume is going to 0. It's just cutting all the frequencies from top to 0, which is just a slightly different sound, but it still kind of does the same thing. Now, the reason I do that is because that then this here, and I could use a gain knob, but the reason I don't is because in AUM, the maximum negative gain on a single knob isn't enough to silence the channel. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to then start stacking them. Okay. So instead, I just filter sweep. And that means that I can mix the kick or whatever is going through channel 1 without it being in danger of being MIDI modulated. So hopefully that makes sense. It means that while things are playing, I can adjust, and I'll load up a track in a minute and I'll show you. But basically I can mix the track as a separate kind of layer to the performance of it without having to think, okay, this fader should only go up to 3/4, otherwise that channel's going to be too loud. I don't want to be thinking that while I'm performing. So basically I've got this set to whatever it is. And the easiest thing is, right, and this is how another way to show how this relates, is like when you click into this is the actual shape. Okay. And as I bring the knob down, this is where it starts, and it starts bringing it down. Now, if I was to just change this shape like that, it's as easy as that to make my filter sweep use the entire knob. You see how that the shape of that sweep has completely changed? The low pass filter is now.
So this part I actually get.
Okay, yeah, cool. So that's kind of the point.
I think the problem for me is the reason why I don't use the one knob technique as much as I think it's incredible is I do need the boundaries. I need the brick walls of the controller, because if I've got 3 knobs per channel and a slider, and I turned them into one knob setups, I would have so many parameters I could mess with. I wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of it, and I need to be able to get to the bottom. Do you know what I mean?
But then just use one knob on one knob, and then just don't overcomplicate it, but just think like, okay, this is what I want from 0 to 100. This is what I want from 0 to 100, and this one I want to just have a third be this setting, another third be that setting, and then it just means you've basically got 6 or infinite numbers of knobs.
Well, I think what it really makes sense is if you were doing it on that low pass filter and you wanted it not to be as a fading filter, but you wanted it as a feature filter, if you like.
Yeah.
Then you would you'd put the resonance and the cutoff on the one knob. So you get so far and you would move the fader to a point where the resonance was interesting, and then you would do it there. And then you could do that quickly, and it has a very musical application.
Yeah. That's right. And the thing is that, like, look what I've just done here. Like, it took seconds. And it means that now, as I change this knob, even though I'm, like, it goes from fully on to fully off to then snapping on. And so you've got control over the entire thing. It's basically, the idea for this came from using Tornado, which under the hood has got very much this kind of setup. It just means that you can basically set up the throw to be different things that combine differently with different types of CCs just by changing these shapes all at the same time, you see. So now having these graphical displays means that those combinations, it's exactly what you just described. You could have a hard on off 3 different settings for a filter with its matching resonance on a single filter. So if you know what you want, you can set it up.
You could have 3 varieties of. Yeah, that's
exactly. So you would just have you instead of having this whole like messy bullshit, you would have like this like that, this like that, and this like that, right? And then you'd have this one like with the matching, whatever the matching like frequencies are, right, that you want. And you could have a little sweep in one of them. So you could have a little bit of wiggle room when you go on the third setting. It could go from 80 to 85% as you don't get it quite right. You know, you might not want it completely locked in, so that you can actually.
Yeah, the most obvious application for it is so on one of my channels I like to put the Polyvox filter, which is probably no great surprise to anybody. And the reason I really like the Polyvox filter is I like a filter that has an envelope on the filter itself. But the nice thing about the Polyvox one is it has 3 controls over it. So you can control the attack, you can control the release, and you can control the plus or minus. So whether that comes before or after, which it is, there's a track that I did on the Beatcast that I used it the most, that I've used it perhaps, and it gives you like a helicoptering sound. So it sounds like there's a lot
modulation.
Because it's modulating the cutoff on the resonance.
That's cute. Yeah. And so the thing is, in this template, which is a blank template, I've got my FX 1, 2, and 3 set up as buses, but they're blank. There's nothing set up here. It doesn't have to be a spring reverb, but the reason for it to exist is because it's all already MIDI mapped to all of this stuff. So I just don't need to futz with the MIDI map.
How do you add one? Show me.
Oh, you just go in here, add it to like whatever you want in there. Say Rundiger or whatever it's called. And now that's what mixes on one now. So like I'll load up a track. We should probably sign off kind of soon, I guess. Is anyone still in the chat? I don't know if I've killed everybody.
We've got 2 people.
2, 4. It says 4 here.
I see
There's
2.
No, there's a bunch. It says 4, but the list. Oh no, yeah, it says 2. I don't know who are these other people. There's a bunch of other people in the list. Anyway,
eyeballs and 2 hearts. I don't know what hearts.
Doesn't matter. It takes the pressure off, right? The fact that you guys are still here. Right, let's go to. I don't know what track this is.
Doesn't matter.
But hopefully it uses the thing.
What I really like about this technique is actually the MyRack piece of it. It's the idea that it can be performed as an instrument. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, again, all this is doing is these are 0. They're like knobs, right? They're just 0 to 127 sweeps that are going to specific CC out. That's all MyRack is doing here.
Yeah, and then the funny thing about this is though, this is exactly how you taught me to use Loopy.
Somebody has to teach Loopy. That's my
name. To build Loopy as a
yeah. And I could use Loopy for a similar sort of thing. This was just my most recent solution for some reason. I don't know why, but yeah, using Loopy as a MIDI controller.
Are you familiar with MMM?
Yeah, I have it. I haven't been using it that much, but yeah, it's really good for knobs. It's really good. But I wanted faders specifically, and it doesn't.
I think it does this.
It's got a couple of faders on it, but it doesn't have 8 faders on it. I know that for a fact.
You can build your own thing.
In MMM?
I thought so.
No. Are you confusing it with like Surface Builder?
All right, maybe.
MMM, which I don't have installed on the MIDI version of it. But if you go to
MMM is Mixmaster Mike. Everybody knows this.
So it's this one. It's got 4 faders on it, but I needed 8 next to each other, and this is really great. It's got loads of modulation stuff. It's got loads of like LFOs and like audio reactive modulators and stuff that you can set up. But anyway, we won't go into that now. Just quickly, let's see if this. Okay. All right. Sometimes when these things load, they send a bunch of weird stuff. Here we go. Okay. Right, so now I've got one LED playing. Now, if I want to add a delay, and then cut it, and then it's as easy as that to just. Oh, except the multi-touch fucks it up sometimes.
The filter that you've got on that bass is lovely. Ridiculous, but lovely.
So what have I got going on that?
What is that?
How are you doing that?
It's like a farming type thing going off there. Is that just nice?
It's just I've just got an LFO. I think it's actually randomized. So let's see. Let's find where that is. So I think what it is in here. Yeah, that's all it is. I've got an LFO going to sample and hold ramp, and it's changing every 4 like beats, and that's just going to that. And instead of using, this is what we were talking about before about the actual remapping in AUM, is I find it probably easier when I'm dealing with a lot of stuff to just change the amount. This changes the amount of LFO from positive to negative on a particular output. So, and this is the bottom like amount. So if I set this to here, that will be as low as it goes. And if I set that up to top, it will go up, right? But if I set that up here and I set that to negative, it will do exactly the same thing, but in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense? So yeah. It's easy. And once you've got those things in front of you, and you can add other modulators, like I could add a modulator to something else, or you can add another LFO and have that added. it's just so much easier to then say, okay, this one I want negative, this one I want positive, this one should only influence it 20% of its LFO like range, and this one should, so it gets it, you get a lot more control over it that way. But basically, yeah, this is all that's doing is it's a filter. Where am I gone? Okay. If I was to take that out, that's the bass line out of Koala. And then I have got a phaser on it. And then
it's just cool, but it's still LFO speed changing on the filter that's making that really wild sound.
Yeah, it's that auto filter.
Yeah.
And then you can change the resonance on it, which you could add on a knob if you wanted, but if I change that resonance, it sounds completely different.
Yeah, be wild.
It's funny. I was going to say I like it, but the times two it's a bit too much.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but Danny's point is like,
Yeah.
Or change it to a high pass. I mean, it's no longer a bass line, but it's quite an interesting element anyway. And then all you need to do is go back to your mixers, which in my case might be the nano control. And why is that all stopped working?
I would use surface filter or I would
Oh, it's because it's soloed. Hang on. Is it? What's happening? Anyway, I've backed myself into an alley, but you get the idea.
I do.
Yeah.
This would be wild to do live, with a nano control in an audience.
So the reason for the template is it gets me to the basics of this, all MIDI mapped, for me to start sending stuff randomly into places. And I can add effects to individual channels as well as sends. I don't need to, like you just saw, I've got here, like on that bass, got Punchlab on the drums, I got these two things on the bass. This is actually not that complicated in the scheme of things, but you could lay on whatever you want on a particular channel, and then you could just start randomly throwing things into that channel and seeing, oh, that sounds amazing. Like I would never have planned to put that effects channel on that particular sound. You just do it and then see, oh wow, that's cool, I'll leave that there. And then you can just this puts me in a position where I get stuck in a loop less easily, because it doesn't well, that's not technically true. I get stuck in a loop more easily, because I'll find myself 3 hours later, I'm still just playing with the faders or filters or whatever on those same like 2 bars, So
you're going to be confident enough to host this template, since we've made a very large portion of the show about.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've people might not have my rack, they might not have. Oh, and actually, there's no one here, so I may as well just quickly show you this. Not this script, but
to how to replace my rack.
Just use it. You've got nano control. Just plug it in.
If I plug it in, but then I have to map.
Well, the other thing is that if you're using this, the thing is, let me just, what is going on here? It's on MIDI mapping, right? So if in here, all of these, so all that is happening is that my rack, each of these green knobs here, each one of these green knobs is the my rack slider. That's all that's happening. So actually, you don't even need my rack. You could just automate these faders, and you could do that just by recording their moves into Drambo. You could
go into Drambo and MIDI learn, and then move the slider.
You wouldn't even need to MIDI learn, because this knob on its own controls those settings, right?
Yeah,
that's what the knob does. The my rack or hardware control of it is just what gives you a tactile interface for it. But if all you're doing is you press record, and then in here, let's say I've got 4 bars, play. and I'm just like playing with this knob. Stop recording, and now it's automated. Like, if I go to, see, it's got a little A on it. This is what I just drew, right? Just by changing that knob. So I now add the second knob to it. Right? So I stop that recording, and now I've got that knob. So it's like you don't need any of the other stuff. You could actually just record these things into these patterns, add another pattern, make this one 8 bars, and while this is enabled, it will stick on one. So you can save different states of faders just to patterns and not have it go through the song. And then you could actually MIDI map these switches to buttons. So you have different states of your song ready to go, and all you have to do is push one button and it will move to this second sequence. I've done that on a separate track, on a previous track. That's basically it. I don't know if you want to like see this like quick little thing that I do.
Sure.
But so I've got this plugin here, the script here called XYfu, and I
know this one.
You've used it?
No, I don't know it. XYfu.
Oh, yeah. So basically, all this does is if I send it to Koala, because as I described earlier, anything like sequence swapping is mapped to Koala directly. So what basically this does is give me a 4x2 grid for changing sequences just by dragging on them, and that's why I don't have snap quantize on, because when I'm recording, I can do these and capture that into Drambo, and I can change that into a 4x4, which means that like now only the top half is the top two, and then
as you drag around the XY pad, it's messing up the stream. I have no idea why. Do you hear
it's
that?
doing what?
It's like crackling when you drag the XY pad.
Oh, there's sound happening in the background.
I was going to say, presumably it's launching stuff, but as you move them.
Am I in keyboard mode?
That's what he was talking about.
That's why. I was in keyboard mode.
Okay.
And this, so these are mapped to MIDI 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 up, right? And so if you're in keyboard mode, whatever sample is selected is going to get a MIDI 0 note going into it, or 2 or 3. So it's super low, like inaudible. Again?
Just to go to touch on something while you're automating those sequences.
Hang on.
We can only map to those 8, can't we? We can't map to the others because they just replace those when you go left and right.
No. They're all chromatic.
So all of the sequences, you can map all of the sequences.
Yeah. They are all mapped. Yeah, absolutely.
He's got 8.
So, like, basically, if I go in here and I show you the MIDI mapping, the first page is C-2, chromatically up to G-2, and then it's G#-2, and it carries on the pages.
Ah, shit, that's perfect. That solves my conundrum.
Well, we got there in the end. It only took 2 hours and 17 minutes.
No, that was
how I would use that.
Basically, there was 2 little side extra questions that I had.
Go on.
I was going to pick your brains, and I noticed, Michael, you had it as well. I noticed you got Punchlab on there.
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing out? Should I be using Punchlab instead of using my collection of stuff? I never tried Knock.
Okay, it's like the poor man's Knock, but arguably could be better.
By poor man, he means it's cheaper than Knock, but he doesn't actually mean it's worse.
But
it's got more. There's more stuff in it.
And
it might be better, yeah.
I think what determines whether it's actually better is like, do you like the sound that it produces? But they're trying to be competitive products.
Let me just solo
Punchlab. I would recommend it. It's cheap.
Where are the drums? Okay. So Punchlab.
But I think FAC is actually
it's got a lot of stuff built into it, right? So it's just like, and you can change the order of these things. not the clip, because clip and mix are the end of the chain.
Yeah.
But it's got quite. I mean, they're quite nice sounding. I think. We're getting more into Pete territory now. And so that's just like crazy saturation and stuff, but it's actually, you can make it auto gain, so it's not sending out super loud, it's just like saturated as well.
Has it got transient?
That's without.
In there?
Yeah. This is the transient. So let me turn everything off. Right, so that's everything apart from transient off. Where are we? Can you hear that clear enough?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So transient.
The bottom there.
It just takes the kick, the punch off the kick. Or if you have it the other way, I'll bypass. Hang on.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think this is actually your drums that you gave me that are already like super processed. So I'm not sure if it's coming through, but yeah, basically it's that. But no, this is really cool, and I've been using it for Funk Moon Camp because again, I'm using sequences that were created by other people, and mix and matching them kind of makes the song more coherent in some way sometimes, just because I can mix like the little fill from a sequence that Bennett made to like the rest of the beat from a Potato Moon sequence, and then in the middle of that I'll jump into one of my sequences, and it just means that suddenly a sequence sounds like a little meld of things in a way that was done by performance rather than chopping and really, you know, overthinking it.
I can imagine using that myself because I've never worked that way. So
No.
I have definitely moved between sequences on the beat, but you're like scrubbing your finger on an XY pad.
Oh yeah, no, well that's one of the things I absolutely. Right. This is what I love about. Right, let me just demonstrate. Right,
yeah,
and I don't know if it'll be that obvious here, but if I demonstrate, I don't actually know what these whether the sequences are different enough from each other to make it. Okay, let me go over to this sequence, turn that off. This track is not varied enough to make it obvious.
Yeah.
Let me load up. Hang on. Let me load up a Funk Moon track. Right, let's do last week's Funk Moon Chem track. And I'll may have to disable Drambo because it's already got the sequence changes in it.
Techniques sometimes sound awful.
No, it doesn't. Look, so here's the thing, right? All of these little notches on here are me changing sequences in the middle of a bar. But because of Koala, like as long as everything is kind of like, let me see how I can actually.
Because
let me start and
have sequences that don't match well. And
well, that's the thing. Like the sequences have to all be kind of in sync, right? Otherwise, it won't work. But for some reason, hang on, I'm getting no sound out of that. For some reason, oh, it's probably because I'm not. Okay, right. Let's get this going. Where am I? Okay, right. So the thing is that Koala is 4x2. So while I'm on sequences B, I'm only changing page 2 sequences. But if I actually go to 4x4 and I go to bank A, that means the top half is sequences on page 1 and the second half is sequences on page 2, which means I can go to this, and it's actually really intuitive. Like, there's 4 slots here and they match these 4 sequence slots. So as long as I know what I'm going for and where, okay. Because the actual line is in sync, so it doesn't matter if I swap off beat. You can kind of go in and out of sequences. Now there's so then you can just like create, like, this is how I actually create an arrangement for FunkMoon Camp, because I'm mixing and matching sequences all the time. Like, and I get, like, usually what we do is as we pass things to each other, we tend to create a new sequence and then have a variation or 2 of it. Mm-hmm. So like, let's say this is one I created. And then they're just 2 variations, but then like here's Campy's original. So he probably started with these top 2 or maybe 3 sequences. So he would make that, and then when you switch, but instead of putting them back to back, I can go and then back, and then swap to another sequence. So I'm just doing that constantly. Well, not constantly. I let things play out, but find some similar things or things that work well together, like the end of this sequence works with the middle of that sequence. And this script, because you can't do that in Koala. You can't just drag over stuff. And this all came out of a question someone left on the Discord, Koala Discord, asking, like, is it possible to do this? Because I can't, like, with performance, even on the performance page, you can't drag these. So it means that you're kind of like tapping, to change free sequences. Whereas this is super fluid. Like, you can just go, I can just change super fast from like these 4 sequences. I can mix them up just by moving my finger. So it's like super handy. And if you want less resolution, you just go 2x2. And now I'm just looking at bank A. This is just the first 4 sequences.
So the other, I have some questions.
Yeah.
So in Koala under the metronome,
yeah,
if you were to change it to after sequence snap in 1 beat, would that be useful or valuable? Because would that make
no, because sometimes I'm swapping in faster than a beat. That's the thing. Like, I mean, the thing is, if it's playing, sure, it would make it a little bit. It depends on the tempo of the track as well, because if it's slow and set to 1 beat, then that's lower resolution than this track, which is
fast.
Oh, actually, it's actually 80, so it's actually not that fast. But yeah, I don't tend to like.
If you wanted to do that, it might be better to do it at a much higher speed, so the resolution is much higher.
But then what's the point?
8ths or 16ths out of it.
I think the point was it might make this change between sequences sound more musical, and by more musical, I mean you might not have a few mistakes.
Yeah, but the other thing is that I will go through and do this, and it will record into Drambo, and it will just go through the entire song. Then you can edit it. So if you'd like, I don't like this note being here, or it was the wrong note, I'll just go in and change that or remove it, or it was a little bit early, I'll move it forward, or I'll move it backward.
One more question.
Yeah.
Do you tend to make the sequences the same length? And if they're different bar lengths, does that cause problems for this technique?
Okay, so this is what I normally do is before, if you'll notice, I'm just going to reload my normal template. the first thing I load, because I use it all the time on a FunksMaName arrangement, is this script I wrote, which calculates lengths of stuff, right? So basically, this using the BPM of the track. So let's say the track was 111. Okay, what this is doing is that it's not updated for some reason. It should update. Oh, there we go. Right, so what this is doing is I'm telling it how long, up to 16, each section would be. So I'm actually mapping out the entire song for a total length aiming at 2 to 2.5 minutes. If you look at the top, it's calculating. It's calculating the length, right? So if I go to, like, how many 8-bar sections of this tempo fit into, this is 1.5 minutes. So let's make these two 16. Now it's 2 minutes, okay? That little calculator there, does that make sense what this is doing?
It makes sense what it's doing. I don't understand.
Okay, well this
question, because
yeah, well okay, let me answer your question. I think is what, like, so now I've got 8, 16, 16, 8, 8, and that's the end of the song. That's 2 minutes. Okay, I'll go into Drambo, which is currently empty of any sequences, and I'll just dial it in here. So I put 8. This is 8 bars. And I'll copy that there because I want that on the effects as well. I'll copy that and make it 16. Okay, so now I'm mapping out my entire arrangement without even listening to the song at the moment, right? All I know is that I've got 2 16-bar sections, an 8-bar intro, and then 8, right? So actually I can just, let me delete that. Remove, and then I'll just click plus on that. Another 2 times, and I know, like, these, well, I did something wrong. Hang on, let me copy that. Okay, right, now I've got an 8-bar track, a 16-bar track, a 16-bar track, an 8-bar track, and an 8-bar track. This arrangement is now 2 minutes and 1 second long. I know that before I even started. And then I start recording sequence changes into it, or I'll might manually put in sequence changes into it, but I know that, okay, I've got 8 bars, so I'll put 4 bars of this sequence, 4 bars of that sequence, and this is my map for that 2-minute track, and it's done.
Can't imagine sequencing something without listening to it.
Oh, no. I listen to it when I'm sequencing, but this keeps me on track. What's happening? I'm useful for Mozaic. It's in AOM and available with no internet. Not a fan.
You're not supposed to do that, Danny.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's more like
I didn't know what all that was. Okay, so that's basically how. And to be clear, this is how I arrange FunksMaName specifically, because I get, by the end of the week or middle of the week, I've got a Koala track that's got all the sequences in it that I know I'm going to have to use, and I decide what to use them and what kind of constitutes a verse and a chorus type, situation. And then I know, okay, like, I need to put 4 bars in between these two, and I kind of map out, because I know I need to hit 2 minutes 30 maximum. It means that it takes all those other things out of it, and then I know what sections to put in where, because I have already listened to the track and I know what sections I want where roughly, but this keeps me on point. When I'm doing my own tracks, I don't use this at all. Like, on my tracks,
and arranging is to be a part of the process that I still find challenging, because at a certain point it's like not about finding interesting sounds that work with each other, and it's more like, I've got cool things, but what's the right way to tell the story? And it's just a totally different way to think, and I still find it to be very challenging. I saw the way you just showed, though, and I don't know that would help me.
That makes a lot more sense to me. Like, ultimately, if I'm having a song and it has to have an intro, then a verse and I'm asleep. Like, I don't want it to have. I don't want it to be on rails like that. It's not. That to me feels really, really constraining. I don't enjoy that, and also there's no purpose. Like, I'm not making a track for a vocalist. I appreciate FunksMaName is a different situation,
exactly.
but for me personally,
I think
But
on my
feel
personal tracks, I work more like you do with these like mixers, and I think
what I'm
that
saying
would
is,
benefit Gerber.
in terms of the way that you're doing it with Funk Moon Camp, you've got a hybrid situation where the verses and chorus can still exist, but the whole arrangement is a lot more fluid.
Yeah.
And what constitutes a verse and a chorus is a lot more playful and kind of it has interaction
It's not
between
like
things.
4
And
4
that's
4
much,
4 and well, I mean, actually, even more to the point is like, even if this map might look restrictive because it's split into an 8, a 16, and 8, a 16, that first 8 might not be anything like the second 8. It might be a completely different set of sequences. So that's kind of just, it's more to keep me on track with the length of the track, really. And I think the blessing of Campy is that, like, it doesn't have to have a verse chorus structure, because it, and also if he feels he wants to rearrange anything, he can do that in the stems when he's recording his vocal. But it's not restrictive for him, and it means that he can tell a story in what happened in the middle of nowhere. I changed to a completely different section that might not. I mean, I tend not to be completely free form about it like that, but the underlying
at the same
grid.
time, I do feel like that's what makes it so compelling. Like that, effectively, the three of you have been making Funk Moon Camp tracks for an awfully long time, and yet they're always new, they're always fresh, they're always different from one another.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that, it's not just the interplay between the three of you in terms of an exchange of ideas, it's the physical interplay of the sequences you've created that occur at different points throughout the whole track. And it's the fluidity of it, I think, that kind of, and I mean, we've spoken about, obviously, Ben, it's the kind of the glue element is almost a cheat code for a lot of the stuff where it can, if you've got a strong vocal thing, you can have a beatless section and it will carry it across, and and all that kind of stuff. But
sometimes
still, it's the way the interaction is so key.
Sometimes the sequences don't sound like they could even ever work in the same song, like sometimes things are so completely disparate that it's like, how is this ever going to come together? And then Campy just somehow finds a way. Like if I mix things together, or if I go from one to another, he puts that carpet over the whole thing, and that the most musically disparate tracks are the ones that need the vocal the most in order to tie it all together. But the other quick thing just is, like, once I've done that with the sequences, then I just move on to playing the sequence back, and I'm just going to town with these effects. And again, I'm just, and this is why I use Koala effects, really, is because A, we're all using Koala, and B, they're just there, already pre-mapped and easy, and that there's enough there for me to just add some variation with, like, cutter, stutter, crush, and filter are the 4 I mainly use. And I'm just, like, playing back the arrangement while playing with these as though it's kind of like a dub thing. Like, so I will mix disparate things by filtering at the very end and then letting go of it, and it'll come back at the change.
And the stems that you're creating and the output, the effects have got their own stem. Is that right?
No, because this is why
each track.
This is why I have this set up, because what is happening is this MIDI is actually controlling the same effects on a Koala instance on every track individually. So it means that when I add a stutter, every stem has that stutter, but they're still completely separate from each other audibly.
Fucking wizard.
So it means when I send the stems to Campy, and I've already gone through doing all these effects, we're not. Before I did this, we were limited. We were. There was a period where we weren't using any effects because it meant that I could only export stereo stems, and then once we started doing this, it meant that I could still use Koala effects and Koala bus effects, although it's a little bit more complicated. I did do a video about it last week.
That's using the mic effect, isn't it?
Yeah, using the mic effect to use bus effects. But the fact that most important to me for Funk Moon Camp is the fact that it routes, if you prefer, the sound through the performance effects. And those performance effects are all being manipulated by exactly the same knob. So I've got like 9 instances of Koala.
You could just use 9 instances of Koala effect, couldn't you?
Yeah,
you could, but it's exactly the same thing. Yeah. You
But
could use
what you
Koala
wouldn't
effects
get then
instead.
is you wouldn't be able to use the mic, and therefore you wouldn't be able to get.
You wouldn't be able
access
to use
all
the bus effects. Yeah.
I
But
find,
actually, with FunksMaName, we don't use the bus effects all that
I
often.
find
But
that
it
bus
just
effects are good. If I'm using Koala in AUM as an AUV3, I find that the bus effects makes things much more complicated for me. So what I tend to do is if I want to use the bus effects, I just resample it within Koala. So
yeah.
I tend to add the bus effects to whatever I got. Once I got it and I like it, then I'll flatten it back down.
Yeah, totally. I think the fact that they're not MIDI mappable makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
It makes my life more difficult for using them in general.
Yeah.
But you know, that may come at some point. They're really good. There's some really good effects
really
in there. But even the filter, you know, it's like great. We've got an LFO, but you can't even modulate that. It's like that filter that I showed before with the bass. There's no way I can modulate that rate. You know, I can't do that. I can't tell Drambo to just randomly LFO the rate for me. It's like, and that's
doesn't have the envelope either. You know, it
yeah,
doesn't have
exactly. Yeah, envelope as well.
the envelope color is. I feel like we've got so many filters on iOS.
Yeah,
We've got
exactly.
an extra bit.
And a lot of the time, like that's the thing. That's why this is disengaged most of the time. Is actually for FunksMaName, I'll use Koala effects almost exclusively. But for my own stuff, I will add a bunch of actually external AUV3s just because it's easier, and I can modulate them and automate them. So yeah, that makes life easier for that. But that's basically it. That's been a lot. And I hope, like, someone.
I didn't realize what time it was. I'm going to have to go get some sleep.
Yeah, I hope you actually saw something of interest.
No, there's something
No, and I need to rewatch
the XY pad. I don't know what you call that. XYfu.
XYfu.
That one's really freaking cool, man.
I'm going to have to split at this stage.
All right, bye, Pete.
Yeah, man.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I need to go to the toilet too. So
we didn't like chat, but I wanted to know like how are things going? How's your job? Like,
we can do that offline. No one needs to know that. Everything's fine. Well, I'll sign off too. Let's just say goodbye because I need to go to the toilet and have lunch. So, yeah, cool. That was fun.
Bye,
and
take care, guys.
We'll see you on Discord or whatever. Hit like, subscribe, otherwise Remy will get upset. And
smash.
We'll see you next week for the actual Beatcast. See you later.
Yeah, bye.